October 30th, 11 a.m. on YouTube. It will be 11 p.m. on the radio, wherever you're listening. Thank you so much for being here on what they call it in my neck of the woods, Lou Orlando Mischief Night. Alex Wolz here with the one and only Lou Orlando. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. Listen, it's Halloween weekend, so no place I'd rather be. Really excited to be doing the show with you, man.
It is Halloween weekend, and before we started this show, there was some great Halloween music playing in our ears that I was enjoying very much, because I think for me, Lou, last year was a bit of an unconventional Halloween for a lot of reasons. It feels like we're back this year, and I know you have been a part of the festivities for sure.
Oh, for sure. I got some good costumes. We'll talk about that a little later.
You gotta save it.
We gotta save it. We'll tease it. But I walked over listening to Monster Mash. So just
oh really?
Just great,
on the way here?
On the way here, man. I had the headphones in, so great vibes all around.
All right, so you're a real Halloween fan. See, I wasn't that deep into it, but it is fun to have Halloween weekend, as you mentioned. A lot of excitement on campus and an exciting time here to be joining us for one-on-one. An exciting time here at the Rose Hill Studios. My first time, also yours, behind the mic for a live show in the studio. It's exciting, and I'm sure you're excited too.
Oh, dude, absolutely. It's just a different vibe being in the studio, man. Done it online, done it kind of in person, but not in the studio.
Yeah, you weren't as big of a part of the Zoom era, because you're a freshman, of course, we should mention. So that Zoom era was so different, and now to be here again for me is very exciting. So happy to be here, and so happy to be with all of you here. Our YouTube audience live at the moment, again, will be on the radio later tonight. So much to talk about, Lou. I think this is one of those times where we have a 3-hour show. We didn't get everything in here. There is not a segment on this show dedicated to college football right now, because there's just so much going on. And the thing we're going to start with is, of course, the World Series.
Yeah, I mean, listen, World Series has been great. I'm personally super excited. As a Yankee fan, last year was terrible because you had the Rays and the Dodgers, two teams couldn't root for, couldn't even watch, kind of paid attention at the end, but Braves and Astros, I can root for the Braves. I have no problems rooting for the Braves, so I'm excited to actually be able to get invested into this, to root for a team in the World Series, and to watch some great baseball.
There's never been a series, I think, with more of a clear rooting interest from 99% of people that are just a fan of baseball. And obviously, you're a Yankees fan. I covered the Yankees this year. The Mets camp might feel a little bit differently about that, considering how they were up on the Braves for much of this year. But the Astros, a team that's just much maligned by much of this country, really. And I think to see that packed crowd in Atlanta, something we haven't seen in a really long time, and to get them now jumping out to a 2-1 series lead, which I know to a lot of people, I'm curious for you, how surprising is it? Because we'll talk more about the World Series as our first segment, but just off the jump, such an interesting series so far. And I'll be honest, I had the Braves winning this one in not short order, but confidently. And I think it's been, while the script has been a little bit different, so far so good.
No, yeah, I absolutely have the Braves winning this. I don't think it's going to be easy, because the Astros are a great team, and they're going to battle. We know what the Astros can do. But I think that's what the Braves have done this entire postseason, is just subvert expectations. Milwaukee was a team with their rotation I had going to the NLCS with that top three of Woodruff, Peralta, Corbin Burns. Braves beat them in 4, basically, win 3 straight after losing the first one. Then they take down the Dodgers, the powerhouse, the super team of the MLB. Mm-hmm. Now here they are against the Astros, up 2-1. So, I mean, I am surprised, but at a certain point, I think I got to stop being surprised and just look at it and be like, listen, the Braves are a good team. They're playing great baseball.
Well, that was a narrative. Like, I thought if the Braves were going to be on the NL side, it had to be a Cinderella team on the AL side. So I thought, I guaranteed a Red Sox-Giants World Series. Dead wrong, obviously, but I thought you would see 2 Cinderella teams in the same year. But the Astros, I mean, we talked about it before we got started, a team that it's not going to go away. It's almost like that bedbug that always sticks around there. People might not be a fan of them, but you have to respect, at the end of the day, how good of a team they've been in. We were talking about Game 4 predictions earlier coming on tonight. I mean, it's anybody's game, and you and I both, while we might have the Braves, would not be surprised if the Astros pulled it out.
Yeah, they got Greinke on the bump, and Greinke at this point I think is the only starter in the Astros I kind of trust.
Yes. And
Astros had their pitching problems, and even Greinke hasn't been great this year, but veteran on the bump. Again, the Braves don't even have a probable pitcher right now. Their starters, it's really slim.
Some mind games, that's what I call it, mind
Listen,
games.
The Astros don't know who to prepare for, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the Astros win this, just because that's kind of their thing. They stay in series, they battle. I think this is going to go to 6 or 7, so I think they might even this one up.
Us as baseball fans, it'll be a big treat. I know we're looking forward to the World Series Game 4 coming up later. And so much more to get into, though, coming on the local side of things. This is that really exciting time, I think, in sports. You have the NFL, NBA, NHL in the full swing, and a lot of excitement, I really feel like, except maybe for football. There's not really a lot to be excited about there. I think the Jets, I mean, if you're excited about Mike White, good for you. But I think this is an interesting time right now for the Jets. We'll dive into them. Now, you're a Giants fan, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, so you're not interested in what happens with the Jets, but such an interesting situation, I would say.
No, it's an interesting situation for sure. And I think, besides Mike White's direct family, and I'm sure Mike White's super nice guy, but no one else is excited to see Mike White out there.
I'm excited to see him.
Listen, we'll see what
Joe
happens.
Flacco, you could see, too, is another interesting situation there. We'll dive into so much of the Jets. But I really think, same thing with the Giants. The opponents they're playing to me are really, really interesting because I think in any other year, a Giants-Chiefs game, we might brush it over and say that's not significant. This feels significant this year. I mean, I really think there's a lot of excitement around this Chiefs team for the wrong reasons, and I'm so curious to see what they do against the Giants because I've got a sneaky feeling that's going to be an exciting game.
No, yeah, the Chiefs are not the world beaters we expect them to be. And I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion. I think the Giants can at least battle with them. I think they could win. Listen, I'm absolutely
I'm going to
biased.
save my take as well, but I think I'm with you, man.
Listen, it's going to be, it could get funky. It could get sneaky.
And there was also that crazy Thursday night game the other day, Packers-Cardinals, which I know there's a lot of excitement about that. I had missed a good portion of that game, walked in at the last second to see that last play, and I was just like, I just saw one of the greatest plays ever, and I happened to just be walking around my living room. So it's an exciting game there. Two other teams that really you could start making the argument, some of the top dogs in the NFL, and that was a really fun Thursday night game, too.
Yeah, there are so many fun conversations you can have about the NFC because they're just, I think the majority of the good teams in the NFL lie there. There are a couple great ones in the AFC. But, you got to see a battle of, I think, two of the strongest NFC teams. And to have it come down to a play like that, I mean, that's what you want as a football fan.
Yes.
Maybe not a Cardinals fan. And I don't know what A.J. Green was doing, but I mean, listen, that's some fun football.
That's why we're not on the field. We are here talking sports. And I should also mention, you mentioned the AFC, and I should mention it is Halloween season over here, and you came in geared up with your costume. As I said, I'm not as big of a Halloween fan, but I did come in the spirit today of my Oregon Ducks jersey. I happen to be a fan of them, and the Chargers are a team that I think is very interesting in that Chiefs conversation. So just to take you inside the studios a little bit, our video audience can see it, but for our radio folks, always having some fun here, keeping in character for Halloween, which is how we're going to end the show. We have some special things in store for Halloween. Some costumes, some plans, some exciting things that we'll talk about there. And we also got some exciting guests in the show as well. We talk about the NFL. We'll be playing you a little bit of our off-the-air interview with Paul Dottino, myself, Nick DeLuca. Really incredible resume Dottino has built up, covering the Giants for, I think it's almost 40 seasons now, and it all started back right here at WFUV, so a really special conversation there. And we're going to start the show after our World Series segment with Dylan Balsamo and Andrew Galata talking to Robert Daly. And this is an extraordinary interview. For those who don't know Robert Daly, author of 31 books, a good number of which have been adapted into motion pictures, former NYPD deputy commissioner, served in the Korean War. I mean, there is so much to unpack with that conversation. We'll be unveiling that one for you around the 12 o'clock hour. And as we head into the back half of the show, again, we keep that sports talk going. A lot of NBA action. This is something that I'm a big NBA fan. Going actually to the Nets game tomorrow on Halloween, so that should be a lot of fun. But some NBA action, Lou, and I'm curious, if I were just to toss you around, wherever you wanted to go on the hardwood right now, is it Knicks, is it Nets, is it something in between? What's on the top of your mind right now?
It's Knicks, man.
Knicks?
I'm feeling good feelings. I'm in a great mood with the Knicks, so yeah.
I'll just say, if I hear the words bing bong at any point during this show, we're going to have a problem.
I'll refrain from that.
We're going to have a problem. But no, I mean, obviously, a terrific start for the Knicks so far this year, and I think really this is a dangerous time in basketball because it's that overreaction time. A lot of people obviously up in arms about the Nets. You hear every single post-game conversation. Our man Jack Roach, who's going to be stopping by later, he always gets that sound for us, and always hearing the questions about Kyrie, and you could tell Durant just getting tired of it, throws the ball into the stands last night. And the Knicks, though, that seems like the team that has New York's eye right now for sure.
Yeah, I mean, listen, maybe too early to say that they're going to the NBA Finals, but right now,
all right. This is what did I just
now
tell
I'm
you about
doing
overreacting?
This, no, I am doing this to get on your nerves, but the Knicks are looking good.
Well, here's
and
the
I'm
thing.
happy.
I don't mind the Knicks being successful. That's not the point. I think this is terrific. I think as a New York person, I'm not a New York sports fan, but I'm a New York person, which I think is important to mention. They are a fun story to watch, and you have to love it. Kemba coming home, team doing great. Tom Thibodeau, love the energy, love the mentality, love that packed MSG. But let's be honest. I've been saying this for a very long time. New York is a Nets town. New York is a Brooklyn Nets town. They are going.
That's debatable.
The reason I say that is because I think New York is a basketball town. And when you have one team that is going to be, I know the audience is not going to listen to this whatsoever, but I think when you have the Nets start winning basketball games, I think they're going to be the team start catching New York's eye. Or the Kyrie Irving is there, not as a whole separate conversation. But there's also a lot of other teams making some strong, poor early impressions, however you want to go about that. I think the Lakers is one team I have my eyes on. The Memphis Grizzlies, always an interesting team. And the Philadelphia 76ers, give a quick shout-out to our man Matt Murphy, calling his first radio game, WFUV alum on the Sixers radio network later tonight. So congratulations to him as this one comes out later in the evening. But some interesting stories across the NBA. It's always fun, I think, with the NBA with the storylines. And this year, a lot of new teams and a lot of new places. I think the league is there's a lot more parity than there's really ever been before so far.
Yeah, really like this good division battles. I think you have you look at the conferences up and down. There's just so many good teams, some up and coming teams that can really do a lot of good things.
So we'll see. We're going to have some NBA talk, and also we're going to shift over into some headlines. We not the traditional headlines segment, but a couple of headlines we've got here. We want to talk about MLB managers. Aaron Boone, of course, coming back to New York. This is a little bit older, but we thought get some time dedicated to that because, like I said, I covered the Yankees this year, have some thoughts. I know you do as well, Lou, always donning the Yankees uniforms around here. And yeah, I mean, just your little taste of what you think about Aaron Boone, if you can give it to us now. I'd be curious to know. Give us a little insight.
I'll say the one teaser I'll say is I don't hate it. Which,
well, that's vague.
I don't. Yeah. Well, listen. Let's keep it vague. We gotta tease some. We can't give everything away in the intro, but I don't hate it. And
you sound like you're positive about it. All right. Let's see.
We'll talk about it.
I am more positive about it, but the more interesting one I think is Bob Melvin. This is an interesting situation. Padres drastically underperforming last year, and the former Oakland A's manager, really the winningest manager in that team's history, makes the jump to San Diego. Going to be interesting to see if the Padres, they seem like they're really just throwing everything they have at the dartboard to see what will stick. I think you have to expect a major jump from them next year and really start making that push. You missed the playoffs this year, and I think the expectation really is a World Series in my mind. So we'll see what they do next season. Should be a lot of fun.
They're in win now, so to get Melvin, I think, is a great move for their organization. What he's done at Oakland has been fantastic. It's interesting to see what Oakland's going to do from here because I think that's a curious move for their franchise. But
Oakland as a sports town really is heading in a south direction. Obviously, the Raiders heading out of town, the Warriors moving to San Francisco, and it really does feel like the A's are going to start, I'm not going to say plummeting, but because that's one of those teams that I feel like the Rays, no matter what the payroll is, can be competitive. But you got to expect they're going to take a bit of a drop-off this year, missing the playoffs, and especially how good the rest of the AL is. And teams like the Yankees that are going to spend, because we've heard the conversations from Brian Cashman and how he knows this team needs to improve. I think they're going to quickly move past the A's, who had a fun run while it lasted, though it probably could have been better. But speaking of some less fortunate, some less positive news, we have what's going on in the NHL right now. We wanted to dedicate some time to this really just evolving situation with the Chicago Blackhawks. So much to unpack here. More of a negative note, obviously, with the sexual assault case going on over there and just really sending shockwaves across the NHL, and something that we got to talk about, got to be addressed, and definitely worth bringing up and taking note of.
Yeah, it's not something you ever kind of want to talk about. It's not a fun topic, unlike some of the ones we have today, but it's just something that needs to be addressed, and it's an unfortunate reality of kind of the sports landscape.
Should be an enlightening conversation. Then our last segment, as we talked about, we previewed it off the top, get some Halloween action, and we do have to end on that positive note. We have some very special images that were sent in by everybody here, except me. See, this is not my fault. See, now Kayla Wenzel's probably in there fuming, but the idea here was to send in photos of everyone's old Halloween costumes, which for some reason you all have remarkably handy, because I don't have those in my back pocket just waiting to whip out. But we have old Halloween costumes, fun festivities. Lou, you seem like a big Halloween guy, because we sent these 15 seconds later. I mean, it might have been a microsecond later. You are sending us these terrific photos of you and your mom, and you said this was not the first time you used them either, which is incredible to me because Halloween has not even happened yet.
No, yeah, listen, I've had these handy since, I don't even think October. Like, I've had these in my camera roll since September, so I've been ready. So, I mean, my advice to you would just be better.
Oh,
like, come on, just be better. Because
see,
it's Halloween, man. You get festive. But what is there not to like about Halloween?
Kayla knows this. I need 3 weeks notice before anything is going to happen, and that's photos included. If I get 3 weeks notice, I will make it happen. But
just expect the unexpected and be prepared.
You got to blame my parents too. They did not come through with the photos. See, I don't keep a lot of photos of myself on my phone, but they have all those archives, and they did not come through. So you can shift your attention over to them. I'm just here broadcasting a show. I'm not worried about that stuff. So.
All right.
And that's basically today. So much to unpack, so many fun interviews, so much to get into. And we're going to get into the World Series in just a little bit. But before that, we want to give you a quick break because I know Kayla Wenzel has some great Halloween music ready to go. So I feel like with the mood of today, we got to get some of that Halloween music for you to get you set up, geared up for one-on-one. It's New York's longest running sports call-in show, World Series talk. Coming up next, Lou Orlando, Alex Wolz, 90.7 FM, and YouTube. We'll be back in just a minute. Boy, that might have been the greatest break in the history of one-on-one. What a way to set the mood. I knew Kayla had music. I didn't know it was that good though, to be quite honest with you. That was good.
I mean, if she's got that in her back pocket for the whole show, we're gonna have a great time.
We make jokes. We make jokes all the time. Copyright-free music. I want everybody out there to listen to this. You can literally find anything, and you can fall asleep to it. You can wake up in the morning to it. There is some good stuff out there, and this is what the YouTube audience loves. That good old copyright-free music. That's not a joke. There's some good stuff out there, Lou. Go to the YouTube audio library. Find yourself some music. Listen to it when you're studying. There's some focus music. I think you'd very much enjoy it. I just want to throw that out there. But back to business. World Series. There's so much to get into here. We've got 25 minutes to do it. Let's get started, obviously. Opening impressions. That's really what I want to start with the World Series. I think the fun thing about these type of games is they're juggernauts. They're 4 hours long. You can break down every single pitch, every single detail. I just want to get your overall impressions. The Atlanta leads this one 2-1, obviously, as we head into Game 4 out at Truist Park. And not, to me, kind of the way I expected the script to go so far. It's been very unconventional in a lot of ways, but at the same time, this is the score that I thought we'd sit at in the series, and I'm curious what you thought as well.
No, I mean, Atlanta's been trying to get here for a while. I think, but the last time they were in a World Series was in the late '90s, and they've been close. Last year, we thought maybe they could have taken down the Dodgers, but the Dodgers come back in that series. So you knew they get to the World Series that they're going to be amped up. And the interesting thing about the Astros is, right, the Astros are a team that they've been here before, and it's not necessarily paying off for them. And they're a very different team than they have been in previous World Series. They're a team usually built on elite pitching. We saw those rotations of facing Cole and Verlander. It's like every night there's an ace on the mound. They're like, can we get 1 or 2 runs? Not the case with this Astros team. They're just trying to kind of put it together with their pitching and relying on their offense to get wins. So I think an interesting dynamic for them.
Certainly.
But love the way the Braves are playing. They're fun, energetic. That's what you want to see from a team that hasn't been to the World Series in 20 years.
First home World Series win since 1995 did it. They're really incredible to think about. A team that has been in the mix for so long but never really gotten to this point has just been incredible this postseason. And I think the interesting thing is that you mentioned the pitching situation, and what's fascinating to me is these two teams are very different, obviously, in a lot of ways. Atlanta is seen as more of this, find a way to get it done, ragtag group of guys. They got the pitching, obviously, that keeps them going. If they could squeak out a few runs here, they'll win it. And obviously with the Astros, as you mentioned, a team that no longer has that dominant pitching and a lot more of the high-powered offense, one of the best offenses in the majors, obviously. But ultimately with this series and the way things are transpiring here, obviously, for the Atlanta Braves on the wrong end of it, obviously with the Charlie Morton injury, a very unfortunate situation. But this really feels like both pitching units really just trying to scrape it together somehow, and whoever could bring more runs across the plate going to be the difference, it feels like, in this series, and the Braves have just been on the better end of that so far.
I mean, listen, shout out to Charlie Morton, Chuck Nasty, for
Incredible.
Getting 3 outs after breaking his fibula.
Incredible.
The fibula that he's using to push off the mound with. I don't know how he did that, but I mean, shout out to him. But then all of a sudden, you look at Atlanta, and they've got 2 starting pitchers, and one of them went yesterday, one of them went a couple days ago. So they don't have a probable pitcher right now, so they're really just trying to piece it together with whatever guys in the pen that they have.
Yeah.
And on the Astros side, it's not that they don't have arms. They got Javier, Greinke, Vasquez. They have guys that they can go to, but they haven't been effective. Yeah,
and I think the thing about the Braves, as we mentioned, they have this mentality of just going all out whenever they can to win these games. And you mentioned Ian Anderson going out there yesterday, throws 5 no-hit innings. They allow a 2-hitter on the day, and he was terrific, Anderson. The second pitcher to throw 5 or more hitless innings in a World Series game as a starter or reliever. It's really something that is kind of unprecedented. In his ERA, hovering just above 1, one of the lowest that any player has made in their first 8 career postseason starts. So that's really, I think, they're short-staffed, obviously, but the guys that are here, young, old, and they've got some other AAA guys they can even call on too, feels like they're ready for the moment. And you have to give a lot of credit to the Braves that are up 2-1, despite really a lot of circumstances not going their way so far because of guys like Ian Anderson and that terrific bullpen keeping him in this one.
No, yeah, the Brave pitching staff has been, absolutely fantastic. And you look at basically in every single series, especially when they're winning games, they're holding down elite offenses to not that many runs. Like, they're not letting up a lot of 8 or 9 run games where their offense is just winning them ball games by, teeing off on the other team. It's a lot of, their pitching going down and shutting down deep, talented offenses. The interesting thing with Ian Anderson, I do want to get your opinion on it, is you throw in a no-hitter, they pull him after 5. We were talking about this a little bit before, off air. Where do you stand on that?
All right, so we're going to get right into it here because this is, to me, a very dense conversation about analytics in baseball, and this is something that people have. I've been on this program very few times, but one of the times I was solely because Dylan Balsamo wanted to hear me talk about analytics because it's something that, it's just in the way that I said it there. I'm not a fan, really, of analytics in a lot of ways. Especially, baseball's the one sport I'll make an exception for it. Especially when we get to the World Series, though, I think it's got to go out the window because this is one of those situations where you got to rely on the energy of the game, the energy of the room. And when you saw what Ian Anderson was doing yesterday, yes, he had the 3 walks, only 4 strikeouts. You could argue there was some lack of control, obviously. But when you have 5 no-hit innings going, I mean, you got to keep that guy on the mound. Granted, it worked out well yesterday. Let's just say it doesn't work out well, which is exactly what happened to the Tampa Bay Rays a year ago. All of a sudden, the whole world is throwing a different tune about this, which is why I think it's very interesting in these type of conversations. If it works out well, you're a hero. If it doesn't work out well, you're a villain. And I think, to me, you just got to roll with the dice sometimes and make whatever decision you feel is most comfortable with. You can't just go, both of these actually guys, these managers, Dusty Baker and then on the Braves side, they really pull guys the third time through the order. That's just the way that it goes in baseball these days. And I don't think that should always be the rhyme or reason. You have to have a little bit more fluidity, even on a day like when it works out for the Braves like it just did.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm looking at a Fangraphs article right now, and it says, in the most 2021 thing ever, the starter was pulled with a no-hitter in progress, and it was a good idea.
Yep.
And I think if you look at it as an isolated incident, I guess it was the right move, right? Because they
was.
win the game, the bullpen shoves, but I don't think that you can look at it as an isolated incident because this is a best-of-7 series. If you go out, tomorrow and the next day, they got 2 more games in a row. They don't have an off day. They play Saturday, they play Sunday.
Crazy.
If your bullpen is, gets beat up a little bit by the Astros because they're taxed, was it really a good move if you could have saved your bullpen by allowing Anderson to go just even like 2 more innings? He doesn't have to throw the whole 9 innings, but let's say you get 7 out of him. All of a sudden, you just need 3 from your bullpen. That carries over into the next 2 games. So it worked right now, but then again, if they get beat up in the next 2 games, I'm not sure that we're looking at this move the same way.
Which is why I respect the Braves' mindset going out there and winning a game and not really thinking about the long term with this bullpen because they used 4 guys last night, obviously Mittner, Jackson, Matzik, and Smith. All of them go an inning, no earned runs, 2 hits. Terrific, just terrific. And 1 inning is enough where they can be back out there, maybe even tonight, definitely on Sunday, no question about it. But as you mentioned, for a team with a 2-man rotation right now, this is going to be another kind of opener. They're going to have to use an opener here and there, or they're going to have to call up somebody from AAA. That bullpen's going to get taxed. And the thing is, the Astros, I think the reason why you understand what the Braves are doing, the Astros bullpen, the Astros starting group, is not exactly a powerhouse group either, which is why you have to feel confident if you're Atlanta. If you can just squeak a few runs by, I think you have to be confident that your offense can generate a few runs off the Astros. I think that's ultimately what you need to be able to say to yourself. And then regardless, as long as the pitching can hold pat, even if it's not a shutout like they did in this game, you have to think the Astros are going to wake up in Game 4. Obviously, they're not going to get 2 hit again. So I think for the Braves going all in on a game where they had the opportunity to win, not a bad idea. I think that's certainly, you respect that. It's more just like you said, the overall trend that this connects to is a little bit more, I think, of the conversation here, so to speak.
And it ties back to the analytics thing of, all right, it's a little bit of eye test and the numbers. Like if you think Anderson looks good, don't just pull him because got to the 6th inning and it says go to our bullpen here because whatever, 3rd time around, or it's the postseason, you want to get to your top guys. If Anderson is your best option, I kind of don't care what the analytics say, but if it's a mix of both, if it's the numbers say this and you don't think Anderson's control is the best, then I'm fine with that. Go to the bullpen. I just want it to be like a legitimate decision and not just we're looking at the numbers. There's no feel for how this game's progressing and what he's actually doing.
That's the one thing we do is be clear about. Anderson threw 76 pitches yesterday, only 39 strikes. So he was pretty much around the zone a little bit. Now, the Astros have been chasing the ball quite a bit in this series, which is why he might look a little bit better around the margins with the no hits than actually he was in actuality. So I understand the decision to pull him on that game. And it's very interesting, as you mentioned, what they do in Game 4 because now your rotation's pretty shot now. It's going to be another bullpen game. You're going to need these guys that you used yesterday to get out there and give you a couple extra innings. And the Astros, like I mentioned, I don't think they're going to have 2 hits again. I don't think they're going to get shut out again. This feels like a game, even though the Braves have been so dominant at home in the playoffs. They've been 6-0 in the postseason at home, a really tough place to play, whether it's the weather, the conditions, whatever you want to call it. A lot of energy at Truist Park right now, and they've been a very tough place to play. The Astros have been very good on the road, and you feel like when they drop a game like this, they're going to be reeling and ready to go out and put a lot of runs on the board in Game 4. And like we said kind of off the top, not surprised if they're able to make a bit of a run there.
Yeah, the Astros have shown through this postseason kind of the ability to come back after a tough loss because they've gotten blown out a little bit. There have been some of these Astros games it's been like after the 4th inning, you kind of know the way it's going to go.
Yeah.
But, their offense has been able, just look at some of the box scores where they're scoring like 9 runs. This offense can kind of explode like just like that. It doesn't feel like it's connected to momentum or anything. It's kind of like day-to-day basis. Is this offense locked in? If it is, you're in trouble.
Well, that's the thing. So the interesting side about the Astros, only 1 game decided by 1 run in this entire postseason. And where everybody does feel so tight, these 2 teams, this is what's incredible to me. They feel like deadlocked in the series. These games haven't really been close, a lot of it. This was probably the closest game, the 2-0 game that we had here. Every other game the Astros have played decided by 4 more runs, except for the one obviously last night. Win or lose, as you mentioned. So it's really a boom or bust type of team. And as we mentioned, their offense has been very high-powered. Their pitching, though, has been inconsistent at best, and it's really a question of which Astros team are you going to get any given day. Whereas the Braves, I think, are a little bit more of a consistent baseball team. That's the one thing that I feel confident about with them. I think they're going to put a few runs on the board every game, and I think their pitching is going to do enough to silence the Astros offense to the point where it doesn't overpower them. That's why they've been able to get to this point. That's why they're still winning right now. Certainly, Game 4, I think, is where the things are going to tip a little bit, obviously, as we mentioned, because they threw a lot of their bullpen out there in Game 4. Or Game 3, already, and the Astros going to be ready to get one back. But it's been interesting, as you mentioned, with the Astros, to be such a boomer-bust team and to be in the World Series. For a 7-game series, it's going to be interesting which side ultimately prevails. Is it that, the one that's scoring 9 runs a game, like you mentioned, or the one that's getting blown out? I think it's interesting to see which side that's going to fall on.
Yeah, and again, it feels like a completely different Astros team from like the absolute machines that we've watched.
Oh, certainly.
The past few years. This is kind of like an Astros team that it just feels like is just trying to hold it together and like just get to the end of this, try and come out with enough wins. It doesn't feel like they're going into every game ready to dominate the way like in 2019, 2017, even 2018. Like the Astros were just a dangerous powerhouse. You didn't want to run into them at all.
Well, that's the thing. So let's think about the Boston series, for example. So the Astros go out and win Game 1 5-4. Boston hangs 9 on them in Game 2, hangs 12 on them in Game 3. We all think this is a blowout. What do the Astros do the next 3 games? 9-2. 9-1, 5-0. And all of a sudden, they're in the World Series. This is the scary thing I think about the Astros, is that we might say their backs are against the wall right now. This feels like a team, though, as you mentioned. Any given day can just flip a switch, and all of a sudden they're rolling right past the Braves, because we know the Astros at their best is better than the Braves at their best. I think you could agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's as close to an objective fact as you can get in this
There you
sport.
go. So I think the question is, can the Astros reach that point? And we saw it when their backs were against the wall, and that really is the thing about this team that we have to respect in a lot of ways. People might hate them. They know people hate them, and they use it as fuel. They use it as energy. They're just concerned about playing winning baseball. So in a situation like this, on the road, down 2-1, you feel like that's the moment things might flip a switch when it looks the worst. That's really been the story of the Astros all year long.
Right, and that's the scary thing, because you mentioned that Red Sox series. And, the Red Sox at a certain point, right, they're up in the series 2-1. They feel like they've got all the momentum. Like, their offense is clicking. They're teeing off on Astros pitching. And then all of a sudden, 3 straight games, the Astros pitching looks like prime Astros pitching, shutting out the Red Sox, who are a great offense. And it's like, well, how did this happen? How did we get to this point where all of a sudden the Astros are not only hitting and scoring runs, but shutting down the other team's offense? And I think that's what you're going to need to see, because since the ALCS, I believe their entire starting ERA is like a 7.3.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're gonna need better than that if you're gonna win a series.
Yeah, and obviously there's some guys in this lineup, Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, who have just been non-factors in a lot of ways. Bregman did get one of those 2 hits last night, but really, you just need to see more from those guys, whereas you've seen on the other end with the Braves, Rosario's been terrific, Freddie Freeman's kept it going, Adam Duvall's kept it going, Travis Denard has a couple hits and homers in this series. They've really had their stars in a lot of ways show up, even regardless of the end outcome, whereas the Astros, as we mentioned, has kind of been up and down. And those are the guys, as we mentioned, Altuve or Bregman or Brantley, Alvarez, another one we were talking about before we got started, guys that you need to start seeing get some hits out of the top of the order. And it feels similar to what we were saying about the Yankees for a lot of the season, is that if those guys at the top of the lineup, those big powerhouse hitters, can get it going, that team could be in good shape. And right now the question is, can they? And that's really what I want to ask you is, in terms of Game 4, if you had to just put your money on and say who you have winning that game, I'll put you on the spot here. Is it going to be the Astros or is it going to be the Braves? And one reason why, perhaps.
Listen, I put it on the Astros. First of all, I believe in Zach Greinke.
That's key.
Veteran pitcher. He knows the moment. The moment's not going to be too big for him. And listen, when you get to the World Series, I think these teams have played enough baseball where I don't know how much nerve is going to play a factor, but it does help to have that veteran presence. Like, he's been here before. He kind of knows how to handle the situation and what to do. And again, I also just have this feel like this Astros offense, after getting 2 hit, is going to come roaring back. And it's too good of an offense to just continue to get, silenced. Like, you mentioned some of the guys, and we could go on forever. Altuve, Brantley, Correa. Like, it's such a deep lineup that you can go 6 and 7 deep. And, like, if Kyle Tucker's, like, your 7-hitter, like, that's an awesome guy to have anywhere in your lineup. Like, their lineup's so stacked. I think it's a fun comparison when you flip it to the Braves. Like, the Astros have all these guys. They're offensive producers that have been here for a few years, especially Correa, Altuve have been here since the beginning of this dynasty. You look at the guys that are really contributing to this Braves team. It's the guys they acquired. Rosario.
Yep.
Traded Pablo Sandoval for him, which is a great move.
I have an old jersey of Pablo Sandoval. I should have brought it, an old Giants jersey.
Adam Duvall, another guy that great midseason trade. Even Jock Peterson's had big moments. So obviously Freddie Freeman's come up big, and Freeman's the one staple in this offense, especially with Acuna out for the rest of the season, that Freeman's the guy you expect to always be in that lineup and produce, but it's kind of been the newcomers that have boosted this Braves team and made sure that they've stayed competitive in games.
So we're going to talk about the offseason, or about the deadline, in just a minute, but I want to throw something at you. Does this change your mind? Of the 60 previous times World Series was tied 1-1, the Game 3 winner, how many times do you think it went on to win the series?
I'll say 65%.
39 times. So right around 67%. Does that change your mind? I hate analytics, so to me it doesn't matter. But I'm just curious.
I still have a good feeling about the Astros. Listen, okay. I still think the Braves. The Braves, I think, should win the World Series. I would certainly hope that they do, but I just have a feeling about the Astros, man. I don't think they're going to go down 3-1 like this.
The other thing I think is interesting, too, is a very minor point. The lack of a DH, I think, is worth mentioning just a little bit because it forces the Astros to really put a bit more of an outfield parlay than they would usually use. I think that's a really minor thing, but when the series does shift back to Minute Maid, I would think the Astros are if they can really squeak out one more game in Atlanta, I think I'd be very confident in them taking those final 2 games at home. Granted, though, Game 4 could change a lot of that. I just to throw some stuff out there. I had the Braves at 5 actually, but very, very ambitious Braves at 5 at the top of this. I thought that was just a storyline that was in their favor, and I don't have a problem with the Astros really. So it was not any sort of a antagonistic relationship there that caused that pick. But that's what I had. I'm gonna stick to it. I think the Braves really do pull out a win in Game 4, and I think it all comes down to Game 5 really, because this is the thing. If the Braves win Game 4, all bets are off. Then it gets really interesting, I think, for the Astros if they're down 3-1. Whereas if they win that game, you have to feel a little bit more. It's really that's really the turning point game in any series is that Game 4, and should be a lot of fun as we get down the stretch here. Now, you mentioned the deadline. So this is the interesting thing that we talked about earlier, because 99% of the New York area might be rooting for the Braves, except a small population of people in Queens, the New York Mets, which is what I think is very interesting, because you mentioned with the Braves, the reason why they're here is because of what they did at the deadline, and that pales in comparison to what the New York Mets did. And I'm just curious to get your thoughts about that in hindsight now, looking at where the Braves are, looking at what happened with the Mets obviously bowing out of the playoffs. How do you think those deadline acquisitions really made a difference? Because we're seeing that it did, in fact, make a difference now in the World Series.
Well, I just think I'm really impressed in the insight of them to make those moves, because I remember when they made those moves, I was like, they're not really in the playoff picture too much. The Mets look like they have this division locked down, the way they're playing and the lead that they had. And the Braves made these moves just to kind of hang in the conversation. And all of a sudden, Mets have the second half collapse. Braves go in the hot streak and they start winning. And the Braves lock up the division. I mean, just talk about the way these guys have produced throughout this postseason. And what they gave up. Like, I think the best thing they gave up was Bryce Ball, a top prospect. Mm-hmm. I think that was in the I forget which deal that was. I think that might have been the Jock Peterson deal. Mm-hmm. But they didn't really give up a lot, and they've gotten a whole lot back, especially in production. So, I mean, just huge shout out to the Braves GM for having the insight to make those moves. I don't think a lot of people were believers in the Braves when they made that.
Yeah, and I think it's obviously very targeted, too, at that outfield, because Ronald Acuna Jr. goes down. What do they get? They get Adam Duvall, as you mentioned. They get Jorge Soler to really rebuild that outfield in a lot of ways. And I think this is the key thing, too, to mention here. It's strategic. What they got was very strategic decision-making, whereas a team like the Yankees, as Brian Cashman, we're going to talk about this in a bit, he was talking about in the offseason how the Yankees he acknowledged after the fact that the way that team was constructed with the moves that they made was still imbalanced, because what did you get? You got 2 power hitters that are hit or miss. Whereas the Braves really, I think, targeted a lot of what they knew their problems would be if they wanted to make a run, and got the guys in there to make the difference. And obviously we're seeing it now. They're really contributing in the World Series. It's really the key guys of this team. Jock Peterson, you mentioned, another one that will factor in a bit. And obviously the Braves now, because of those moves, you could argue, they went from being a non-factor to being in the World Series. Because my argument, what I've always said, is if you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. They're an 88-73 team. They're 7 games behind the Astros. That doesn't really matter, though, at the end of the day, because when it counts, they've got the guys, they've got in the playoffs, they've got the home field when they need the most. And when you have all that going in your favor, even if you might be an underdog, regardless of what the regular season says, you've got everything in your power to really make a run at the playoffs. And I think you got to give a lot of credit to Atlanta going out, spending the money, getting the guys, and having confidence in this group, as we mentioned, who hasn't been in the World Series in quite some time, knowing that they could put their foot down when it counted to make a run because of those moves at the deadline. Really impressive story, I think, in a lot of ways.
And this is why those fringe playoff teams, the teams, they go out and they make these moves, and you go, well, this only makes them slightly better. Like, they're still not the favorite. They're still, they get into a series, they're always going to be the underdog. But again, it's always just get into the postseason, and then whatever happens, happens. And I mean, the Braves are, the perfect story about that. They had to take down they've taken down 2 really good teams. They might have to take down a third if they want to win the World Series. But they put themselves in a position to do that by just getting enough pieces. They're not a super team by any stretch, but they have the right guys to make it competitive, to be able to put up a fight, and that's really what all you need to do.
Yeah, and I also forgot Marcelo Zuna hasn't been a part of the team either on administrative leave back in May. And you talk about Peterson, he came in exchange for an infield prospect. Really not much. And is it a coincidence that they happen to beat the Dodgers to get to the World Series? Probably not with him there. That's what you have to consider too. It's one of those, again, you have to give a lot of credit to the Braves because I think a lot of people thought it would be Dodgers-Giants, but really this Braves team has kind of come out of nowhere to pull out a win in this series. Or I shouldn't say pull out a win in this series. Let me take it easy here. But pull out a win in Game 3 and make a run here. And my question to you that I think is so interesting, I want to talk about the Mets for a second because let's just say the Mets, obviously they're looking to hire a new manager, hire a new GM, and get things running on their side of things. Do you think if the Mets did, in fact, go all out and do kind of what the Braves did in a lot of ways, could they be in a similar position? I think that's a really interesting question. Same division. They were atop that division, whereas the Braves were crawling from the bottom. How do you think this script, if at all, could have been different if the Mets were the team that made these moves as opposed to the Braves? I think it's a fascinating conversation.
I don't think it's completely unrealistic to say that maybe they're not a World Series team, but I think they could have won at least a series or two, especially if DeGrom's healthy. And you look at that pitching staff, like they had a lot of good pitching. They had their offense underperformed, but they had talent. And let's say you make the moves. I look at the Yankees. The Yankees traded for Gallo and Rizzo, but the entire offense saw an uptick because there was a noticeable all right, we're buying in.
Yeah,
we're going.
They wouldn't have
all
made
in.
the playoffs. That didn't happen.
Yeah, we're going all in exactly. So their entire offense got a boost. I wonder if the Mets showed more of a desire to improve their team and not just we're going to stick with what we got. Does that boost the entire offense as a whole? And then again, you look at pitching can win you postseason series. We've seen it happen before. And the Mets, even with some of their injuries, still have a really great pitching staff that I think could have done well in the playoffs.
Well, that was the interesting thing to me, too, because I think when you look at this, it's not just about the players, but we saw, as you mentioned, there was a tangible energy, a palpable energy in that Yankee clubhouse when those guys came in. Even though Gallo was not playing well for a large majority of that second half of the season. Rizzo obviously came out, was clocking home runs left and right. But there was an energy in the clubhouse. And the Braves, I think, in a lot of ways, is the same thing, where let's just say you're at the deadline and the Braves management does nothing and they keep the team as it is. It's almost like you're resigning in a lot of ways where you're saying, okay, you could make the argument they have confidence in their group that they're going to pull it together. But when you make these moves and go all out and make a difference to really push toward the World Series, this is management saying, okay, I have confidence in this group and I'm going to back you up to make a run at that World Series. Whereas with the Mets, they made a move. They got Javi Baez. Did that really, though, tell anybody this is a team that wants the World Series right now?
Yeah, it almost seemed like a half measure, right?
Half
it's
measure.
We have to do something. We have to do something so that we don't get killed by the media, so that our team doesn't lose hope. So we'll go out with trade for Javi Baez, but they didn't address any of their needs. It was all right, we have another infielder because Lindor's hurt for a while. When he gets back, one of them will move to second base and we'll figure it out. Yeah, that didn't really. It's not the boost of confidence that I think Mets fans and the Mets as a team really wanted to see, and I think that's why it's interesting, right? Talking to Mets fans and hearing that at least my friends are rooting for the Astros. Obviously they probably don't want to root for the Braves just because as a general principle they're in the division, but maybe there's a little envy there. Like that could have been us. We could be doing what the Braves are doing right now. So
well, that's the thing, because me, as somebody who's not a Mets fan, I've never had an issue with the Mets' approach this season because that 3 to 5 year timeline. I've always thought about that. If you win all in this year, would I still have confidently said they would beat the Giants, they would beat the Dodgers, they would do any of that? No. I would have never said that if we got to the postseason. But now you look at what the Braves are doing and you say, well, maybe that could have happened. And do I still think that the Mets made the right call ultimately in what they did at the deadline? For the most part, yes, because I think at the end of the day, that team was flawed, not just in the players, but in the structure of it. I think you would maybe agree with this in terms of there was something obviously that was missing with that team in terms of an energy and enthusiasm, just something about that team and how it clicked wasn't quite there. Even if on paper, you could make the argument their roster is just as good as anybody's, but they didn't have that experience, I think, of that leader in the clubhouse, that person that they needed. Maybe they could have got that at the deadline. Maybe we'd be writing a different story. But now I think is really the time the Mets have seen, hey, if a team goes out, they make the moves, they can be in the World Series from the NL East. I think that has to give you some sort of confidence. They can do that too and make that priority number one this offseason when they do make that new manager hire and they do start making a push to the World Series themselves.
And that's a good point because, again, on paper, they're a good team. And I still believe that they have a lot of core pieces there that can work. Obviously, you have DeGrom, but I think you look down that rotation, and even if they lose a guy like Syndergaard, I think they can still recover. I like some of the arms in their rotation. Before this season, I loved their offense. I loved McNeil. I think Alonso's really good. I loved Conforto going into this season. Obviously, you feel a little different about some of those players, but I still think that they're in a solid spot. They have a better foundation than most, and it just becomes, how how much are they going to pour more money into this, or is it more take a step back and let's see, maybe let's make some quieter moves? The Braves didn't exactly make flashy moves.
That's true.
This trade deadline, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
The biggest guy they got was Adam Duvall when they got Jock Peterson. He wasn't exactly killing it.
No.
With the Cubs. Soler was having a rough year in Kansas City. Now he's had good seasons before, but wasn't killing it. They weren't world beaters by any stretch, but they just got pieces, and I wonder if it's more of a get the right fit for the team rather than the best player available necessarily.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I remember when this deadline happened, I kept telling people, look at what the Braves are doing. And everybody said, oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, they're non-factor. Oh, it's the Giants, Chris Bryant. Oh, it's the Dodgers, yada, yada. I mean, look, this is, like you just said, is a really great point. Strategically, as we talked about at the beginning, seeing where you have a weakness, targeting that weakness, and now here we go. You're in the World Series. So, I mean, look, I hate having this type of conversation because it's all hypothetical, and this is what a 3-hour sports talk show does to you. And I think that's the thing at the end of the day, is that it's so interesting to think about, because I'm somebody who thought, this is going to sound nuts right now, I thought the Mets would be a 100-win baseball team perhaps this season. I was that confident in them because I thought that the roster that they had, they could be that good. Obviously, DeGrom goes down, one thing happens, Lindor doesn't show up till the second half of the season. Regardless, though, that was a team I was really, really confident in, and the Braves, at the very least, just has to give you a reason to believe. Here's what I'm going to end it on. This should give Mets fans hope, because it gives them a reason to believe they too can be the Atlanta Braves based on what they've done this season. You like that? Is that a good resolution for you?
I do like that. And I think there should be a little extra motivation, because besides what the Braves did right, you have to look at yourselves and be like, we let the Braves get to this spot.
That's exactly it.
If you don't have a second half collapse, that's one for the ages, in the sense that they were in first place and all of a sudden they're not even above 500. If you don't have a collapse like that is that horrific. The Braves are not in this spot. You could have stopped this. Now, I mean, listen, you want to have some Monday morning motivation, just tape that to the wall.
But I kept it positive, and you go, oh, if they didn't collapse, they would never have been there.
But I think you need to mix both. There's some positive that we could be doing this, we could be where the Braves are at,
fair.
And you need some of that negative motivation that we gotta step up. We can't do that again.
I like that. All right, I think that's a good middle ground to leave it on. We're satisfying both Mets fans, the happy and the sad. So now we got a lot more to get into, though. So that's all for the World Series Game 4 coming up soon. Should be a lot of fun, and we're gonna have a lot of fun with our next interview with Robert Daly. Incredible story. He is young as ever, still writing. He's doing a lot of poetry right now, some interesting stuff that you'll talk about with Dylan and Andrew. So much to get into: his time in the Korean War, time with the NYPD, author of 31 books, as I mentioned. He'll talk about those, talk about writer's block, a lot of really just fascinating conversations in sports, but also outside of sports. We'll get to all that and more. Sit back, relax. Robert Daly coming up next right here on One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show.
You're listening to One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I'm Dylan Balsamo alongside my friend Andrew Galata with you right now for this wonderful conversation we are about to have. He's a graduate of Fordham University and Fordham Prep, served in the Air Force during the Korean War, and that is just the beginning of his life. So much more to talk about after that with the New York Times, with the New York Giants, with the NYPD, an incredible life. We're going to talk to one of the most active, in my opinion, non-genarians, and it's Mr. Robert Daly. How's it going?
It is going fine, and that's the first time I've heard that word applied to me. It's kind of a shock.
Well, it might be a shock, but it's also quite the achievement. So I hope that's at least something to be proud of as well.
You know, what's curious, when I was growing up, anybody 50 was over the hill. And now we can live to this age and still be with it. I mean, I'm not walking with a cane or crutches. And I'm fairly in, what was I going to say, with it still. And that didn't happen in the old days. I don't know why.
Well, we're very grateful that you're here with us, and you bring that up. So let's start right up with that. The not a ton of people at your age are perhaps at the we'll say spry level that you are. What is your active daily routine to try and maintain that?
Well, when I'm writing, which by the way is nearly all the time, because even now there are letters to write. I'm trying to write poetry. Yesterday I worked all day on the stanza of a poem, and I finally got it just the way I wanted it, and pushed the button and managed to erase it. And so I spent all morning before you came on trying to find the damn thing. I never did find it. Then I tried to reconstruct it. So, one is busy even at this age, if one wants to be. And writing poetry is a thrilling thing. I make jokes about I'm going to sell each one of them for $1 million. Well, you know as well as I'm not going to sell any of them for anything. There's no money in poetry and never was. And I wonder if even Shakespeare made a living. But it's great fun to do. It resembles in my head crossword puzzles. You're trying to fit things together. You're trying to find rhymes. Poetry must rhyme. I'm not interested in the modern poets that you can't read and I can't read. I'm interested in poetry that has a feeling to it, that makes a point, that rhymes. I never felt meter was very important because you can have a long line followed by a short line for the effect, the punch that it gives. Anyway, I'm busy, yes.
So obviously, you've been throughout your whole life extremely busy. Like we were talking just before, Dylan came on, and it was just, you're talking all year, you drove 250 miles to something that, didn't exist, an event that didn't exist. Is that something that you were busy, obviously, throughout your whole life? Do you try to keep that same level of, obviously not to the same extent, but still that same level to keep your mind busy and then also active life as well?
People seem to think that if you write a novel or two, not only did you make a fortune writing them, but that the royalties keep pouring in afterwards. And none of that is true. You do not make a fortune as a freelance writer. If you're lucky, you get by. But to get by, you have to work all the time. I finished Prince of the City, for instance, and the very next day started a new book. I didn't get paid much for Prince of the City. And I even hesitated before I took the job, thinking I can't afford to do this. But eventually it sold to the movies. It sold to the movies for $500,000. My God, where'd that come from? Wow, look at me. And after that, a number of them sold to the movies. And that's where the money was. The money and the royalties that are still coming in, but they're coming in and selling 2 books a day or something like that. First thing I do when I wake up in the morning is call up my Kindle payoff sheet to see how many I sold the night before. Silly, but that's what writers are. You write to be read. And it means a lot. Even 2 readers yesterday is lovely. And at the end of a year, there'll be several hundred. Big deal. It's not for the money. I've often talked about all of us have to make a living every day of their lives. Even writers who supposedly get millions for writing novels and the royalties pour in for the rest of their lives, which is, I tell you, that's nonsense. So each time I finished a book, I had to start another. And that meant often, running around trying to get contracts. The book I want to write next is going to be, let us say, The Cruel Sport. I go to my publisher, who isn't the slightest interested. I laid all my photos out on the floor, and he wasn't the slightest, didn't have the slightest interest. So then I go on to another publisher and do the same, and finally find one who's willing to take a chance, because photo books, as I'm sure you know, are very expensive to produce. I had another book about bullfighting called The Swords of Spain, with the same number of photos of mine about bullfighting. Unfortunately, there's no big market for bullfighting like there is for Grand Prix racing. Grand Prix racing has caught the imagination of the world. Bullfighting is important only in Spain and some Latin American countries. And I've never made an extra nickel out of that book, which, believe me, is, I think, better than The Cruel Sport in terms of the pictures and the writing.
Talking here with Robert Daly here on WFUV's One-on-One. Something we were also curious about is, obviously you talk about the life of a writer. You have spent your whole life around writers. Your father, Arthur Daly, won a Pulitzer Prize as a sports writer. And for lack of a better way to ask this, what is it like to be the son of a Pulitzer Prize winner?
To me, he wasn't a Pulitzer Prize winner. He was dad. And I think that's the normal reaction. I didn't realize until many years afterwards what a big deal this must have been for him, how thrilled he must have been. I know that at the time the letters poured in and he answered every one of them himself. Thank you for congratulating me, etc. All of that, when you're living in the same house with this person, you hardly see. Nothing has changed since yesterday. He's still dad. He always was dad. And I didn't realize even, I go out into the world to make a living. And my father really technically didn't raise a finger. He never set up an interview for me or praised me to anybody that might count. But all the doors were open, which I never realized till afterwards. Arthur Daly's son wants to come in and offer us something. Well, let's talk to him. Maybe he's got something. And so that was another stroke of luck for which I'm very grateful.
Yeah, and then obviously, with your father being this, great writer, amazing sports writer, was that something that led you to try to be an aspiring sports writer? Was that one of your main influences to maybe the way you wrote or what you wanted to do?
I don't think so. It was, however, an avenue that was open to me. And I didn't have any others open to me. So I took it. And as I say, I found that when I approached sports editors or editors of magazines or whatever, they were willing to listen to me. And then all I had to do after that is produce something they would publish. And so I worked some of these early things, I worked them over and over and over for days, weeks even. And they did get published. Very, very few, one or two, is all I can remember, were rejected in all those years. But I learned to set the sail up in advance. I go to you as an editor of something, how'd you like an article on such and such? And you tell me, nah, we had that last week. And I say, well, okay, how about this? And finally throwing these ideas out is one you'd like to have. Don't forget, editors are always searching for ideas. They have to fill their magazine or their book, whatever, every day. So you can get in with your ideas. I didn't realize that. I thought they were being nice to me. But anyway, I would go in there and pitch these ideas until they latched onto one. They were all ideas that interested me. I'd always be curious about whatever it was that I was offering. I'd like to find out more about this. Now, if you are curious, that's the most central attribute for a freelance writer. Without that, you're not going to make it. If you're curious, if you're dying to know why and how something or someone works, it's a terrific métier. You find out all this stuff. I'm not saying, for the most part, you don't get close to your subjects. I mean, they all, coming to somebody's house to write about them is not enough to make the guy want to be your friend for life. So in a whole career, I've made one or two very close friends. I wrote an article about tenors, for instance. It was in Life magazine, which was a big magazine at the time, and wound up being friends with Franco Corelli, with Richard Tucker, with James McCracken. And McCracken, I later wrote a book with McCracken and his wife, and we wound up friends for life. I made the eulogy at Jim's funeral. But that's rare. That doesn't often happen. It happened that time. That's it. But for the rest, you satisfy your curiosity. It's thrilling to satisfy your curiosity. And you go home and you write the story, and you make a living, which is, again, the most important thing. Unless you make a living, you can't go on with it. You have to find some other line of work.
Again, here with Robert Daly here on One-on-One, Dylan Balsamo, Andrew Galata here with him. Now, talking about specifically your coming of age, you go to Fordham Prep, you end up at Fordham University as well, finish up there and serve in the Air Force, and then you're trying to make it as a writer. And you talk about, feeding your curiosities and finding new ideas. How is it that you would go about searching for new things to be curious about, new ideas to have? Where would you find them? Where could you find them?
When I was starting out, I was desperate to get ideas, and I didn't know about pitching or anything else. And I met a freelance writer called Martin Gross, who was a little older than I, and he made his living as a freelance writer. And I said, "How do you do it?" And he said, "Well, I go through the newspaper and I note down ideas that interest me that would make a story. And then I call up the editor and I say, let's have lunch tomorrow. And I pitch the idea to him, and he gives me the assignment. So that's what you should do. Call up some editors and invite them to lunch. Don't worry about it. They'll pay for it. That's what they do." I didn't believe him, of course. And I didn't have the nerve to call up these august editors. But eventually you find someone, an in, as I did. I wrote, I paid my own way to the Winter Olympics in 1956 on the grounds that the Times would pay me $50 for any article they published. I think they figured to publish 3 or 4, and I wrote 14. No expenses, so that covered the expenses and then some. All right, and then I took one of these articles and took it around a magazine saying, I'd like to write a full-length article about this guy. And finally, I found a magazine that wanted it. So I did the article. Now I can take the finished article and show it to other magazines and say, I'm a professional writer. This is what I want to do next. Are you interested? And you get turned down a lot. I guess I have a pretty thick skin because rejections never stopped me. I knew they were coming very often. I expected them in some cases, and in others it was a shock. But nonetheless, rejections you have to take. You have to ignore pain, if any, and go on with your pitch and pitch somebody else. So that's how you do it. And I'm ever grateful to Martin Gross for telling me in a paragraph how he did it, and that I could do that too.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us again. And I wanted to jump into and ask about your time with the Giants as the PR director, because obviously the NFL was a lot different back then than it is today, and it's not the big $1 billion business that it is. And I feel like back then you probably got very, very close to all these larger than life legends and Hall of Famers, whether it be Frank Gifford or Sam Huff and these big Giants legends. What was the dynamic between a PR director and a player back then? And what was kind of the difference, maybe even with the media that were covering, the Giants and really that team? Obviously, it was still the New York Giants popular, but it's not like the big NFL like it is today.
Listen, what you just said is, of course, true. I was the publicity director of the New York Giants of the National Football League at the age of 23. And at the time, nobody was interested in pro football. The biggest crowd was 30,000 people. In 1956, the Giants won the so-called World Championship. There were 5,000 empty seats in Yankee Stadium. No one was interested in what I had to sell. But I went on trying, and pro football from one year to the next exploded. And all of a sudden, I had an important job, and it was easy to place stories and get publicity and so on. So as far as knowing the players, I got very close to Kyle Rote. He came to dinner a few times, and he was a very, very intelligent fellow. He wrote cartoons and short stories on the side, never dared show them to anybody, I think. But anyway, less close, but still close to Frank Gifford. Charlie Connolly and his wife came to see us when we were living in Nice one year. We all went out to Monte Carlo to dinner, etc. So I got close to a few of them. But I don't know what to say about it except that they were friendships in some cases lasting. Rote lasted many years. But I was interested in these guys, and I knew all of the statistics. I knew all about them, and I could get journalists to write articles about them. And they took me for granted, if at all. From the age of 23 to the age of 28, I worked for the Giants. And then I figured I want to be a writer. I got to get out of this and get onto a newspaper or something. So that's what I did.
Here still with Robert Daly here on WFUV. Now, another question I have is, we talk about your time with the Giants. An odd place for someone to be if what they want to be is a writer, as would be the case to be the deputy commissioner of the New York Police Department. Those are both examples, I think, of things where I'm curious about it. How do you wind up there? Obviously you talk about, your dad really had nothing to do with any kind of success you've had in your life. So like, how does were these happy accidents? Did you just be in the right place at the right time? What exactly happened?
Look, I got sent by a magazine to write a profile of the police commissioner, and he was searching around for a deputy commissioner at the time. And one of the mayor's men said to him, "He's the guy." I didn't know the guy. I didn't know the mayor's guy, and I didn't know the police commissioner. But it winds up he offers me the job, and I didn't even know what it was. And I thought to myself, well, it's something new, might be exciting. And I took it. I remember the first couple of days sitting in this office with institutional green walls and saying to myself, what in the hell am I doing here? How did this ever happen? Why am I here? And then I figured, well, as long as I'm here, what can I make of it? And it was pretty easy to make a lot of it. First of all, by getting to know all the people, which had never been done before. You might be amazed at that, but cops are fascinating people sometimes. And what they do is, of course, fascinating. So I would go around in radio cars with detectives in the night, and we'd go up on rooftops for man with a gun runs. There was never a man with a gun any of the times I was on the roofs with cops, but it was a very exciting thing to do. And it was a fabulous year in the police department. There were a number of cops massacred, assassinated. And the Black Liberation Army was in existence claiming all these killings. And there'd been the NAP Commission investigating police corruption. So the corruption was on everybody's mind. And I was right in the middle of this. And I just loved it. I would have, sometimes I wonder why I'm not there still. I love that job so much and being in that spot. And anyway, and then I was out again looking for a writing job. And so I offered police novels to various publishers and caught on with first one and then others. And so I began to write novels about it. I had learned a lot. I had a lot of details, a lot of facts, a lot of things where I'd been present for. One of the things I realized is that nobody had ever written anything about the police hierarchy. I'm not talking about a nonfiction story. I'm talking about fiction. And I'd been in all these executive conferences and listening to 50-year-old cops with stars on their shoulders discussing how you run an organization like that. Well, that's pretty dramatic. Can I make something of that? Can I use that? Can I make that into a story? And I found that, yes, I can. And I did it. And it was a part of the police world, as I say, that nobody had ever done before. I don't know how much of that is luck and how much of it is just having to make a living every day.
And then what I also wanted to ask about is that, you had all these great experiences, whether it be with the NYPD or, in foreign sports like Grand Prix or Matador. And it seems like, back then, and so different from today, whereas articles, writers, they can write, in a few hours and they'll get the article published, these very short articles because people's attention span, smaller, social media, all that stuff. But back then, it seems like it was a lot more descriptive articles, takes long form articles. And was that something that would then you first write an article and then maybe, you'd write a magazine long form article and then it would turn into a big book? Is that just something to be like, as you got more inquisitive about it, talk to more people? Is that kind of the dynamic that it was, in that era?
Well, first of all, when I started living that life, I never wrote a word until I got an agreement, an assignment, sometimes a contract, and most often with money up front. So it was in many ways a business, but the writing part of it was just love, of having loved being in this milieu and being around these people. And what can I do with it? Can I make that into a novel? If so, how? And it's got to be fresh. It's got to be something that hasn't been done before. Well, with that wide experience, year after year inside the police department, you have so much experience. You can play with it, so to speak, and form it and manipulate it and use it for yourself. And that's what I did.
So here with Robert Daly here on WFUV. Something I'm very curious about is you yourself, obviously, it's very clear, a very curious person, and you're interested in a lot of things, and a lot of things intrigue you, and you like to pursue those. And a question I often have for curious people is, are you ever able to be satisfied with the work you've done and sit back and go, what a time I've had, or is it just on to the next thing?
Well, as I say, talking to you, I'm satisfied with what I did. It's very, very pleasing to realize you're interested. Maybe what I did was interesting. At the time, that idea never occurred to me. And the drive forward was curiosity about finding out about this stuff and then finding out ways to use it and to sell it, which I had to do anyway if I wanted to make a living and go on learning. All of this is it's all interwoven. It's not as complex as it sounds. That's just the way the world works, and that's the way I worked it.
And a question I had as you talk about people being interested in your work, and when someone comes up to you to when they want to adapt your novel into a film, what's that process like? And do they does it I guess it maybe varies by director or writer, but how much would they adapt the book, and how much a say do you have it going into the film? And would you ever do you control those types of things when your novels are being adapted to a film?
If you sell a book to the movies, if you sign the contract, you take the check, you have no further leverage whatsoever. And most often, the director doesn't want to speak to you. He won't even allow you on the set. The first one, I guess, was Prince of the City, and I called up Sidney Lumet, the director, and I said, "You're starting shooting tomorrow. I want to be on the set there and watch." And he said, "I wish you wouldn't, Bob." And I didn't. But that's normal, I later learned. You don't own it anymore, they own it. And you have no right to say, how much of it are you going to use? You have no right to say, why did you distort this? Year of the Dragon was my book and made into a movie. And I saw it finally. Actually, I read the screenplay and decided I was never going to see it. And one of my daughters said, to her mother, "Don't let Daddy see that film." Well, the director and the writer The writer was Oliver Stone, who was a big name now in screenwriting. And he saved, thinking about it, all of the really dramatic stuff that is in the book, Year of the Dragon, is not in the movie. He threw it all away and made up his own story. And I think I've found several times that there's almost nothing of mine left in these moving pictures, that the director, the writer, made up their own stories out of it. And you have no right to complain. You cashed the check, did you not? So shut up and step back and write another book. And with luck, sell it to the movies too. And they'll maltreat it by your standards. I mean, Year of the Dragon made my reputation in Europe. I hated the film and considered it very badly done. The French loved it. All of Europe loved it. My price in France skyrocketed. So what are you supposed to think? What are you supposed to do?
We have one more question for you before we let you go. Something I'm really interested in is with all the works that you've written, with all the time that you write, and I'm sure you experience this more now with poetry, which is perhaps a little more on the abstractly creative side. How often do you get writer's block, if at all?
You know, I have never had writer's block.
Wow.
Never. And I'm curious about people who do. I've always figured all you have to do is sit down and say, well, what am I trying to say? What is this about? And how am I going to do it? And then do it. And I get plenty of writer's block in writing poetry, which is to say, I have no idea what to do next. That never happened writing novels. I often thought about it and wondered, am I peculiar or what? What's going on here? But what am I trying to say? What's holding me back? What do I do next? And then do it. Dissect what you're trying to do if necessary in your head. Figure out why you're blocked. But writer's block has to be because you don't know where to go next. And if you can get away with, get rid of that, you're okay. So no, I've never had writer's block.
Well, this has just been an incredible chance to talk to you. We could really edit this conversation into any order we want, and it'll still be fascinating. We're so grateful that you've joined us. Thank you.
Well, you're very kind. You've all been very kind there. Thank you.
That's author and Fordham grad and polymath, if I will use the term, Mr. Robert Daly. This has been One-on-One. We'll be back with just a little more in a little while, so stick around.
Well, conductor Kayla Wenzel back there, getting her orchestra going. It is Mischief Night, almost Halloween, and that's incredible.
That's nuts.
My heart
That's
is like
crazy.
pounding right now. I mean, that in our headsets is just ringing.
It kept getting faster, and it is too much.
That was
It was
something.
awesome.
I mean, it's Halloween. You got to celebrate
love
the occasion. So a fun interview there with Robert Daly. I love the answer on writer's block. I think that's awesome because I love people. There's always ideas out there, right? And I'm curious. I know you're a writer, so I mean, what is your thoughts on that?
I mean, listen, I can't speak to never having writer's block. I've certainly experienced it a couple times in my day trying to write some essays, but I love his sentiments. He makes it sound so simple, so I love it.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a great
anytime, I'm
answer.
a big stream of consciousness guy. So anytime we have an essay or a paper, put it all down on the paper, edit it later, and I think that's always, sounds like Robert Daly's in the same mindset about that. So a big thanks to him. I know he's very busy, as he said in the interview, with that poetry. So big thanks to him for taking the time with Dylan and Andrew. A lot of fun in that conversation. And going to keep the fun going here with a less fun topic. So we're always having fun here on One-on-One, and that is the NFL. I don't know where to start. I'm thinking the New York Jets, though.
Let's do it.
Let's
Why
do
not?
it. Well, where do we start with the New York Jets is the real question. They head into this weekend 1-5, taking on the Cincinnati Bengals after getting trounced by the New England Patriots. And, well, they don't have their quarterback for it, Mr. Zach Wilson. And what is really, our Jets reporter, Mike Lee, can put this on Twitter, the worst possible case scenario if you're a Jets fan right now, as they don't have much of a quarterback. They signed Joe Flacco as an option at backup, but it is going to be Mike White making his first career NFL start. What are your expectations?
Well, not high for sure, because he
Mine are
came
through
in,
the roof, I tell you.
He came in last week and was what you would expect out of a guy named Mike White, who you've never heard of before in your entire life. Let's be realistic here. But I'm going to hit you with this. I really, truly do not think it matters who plays quarterback if it's not Zach Wilson.
No.
We can get into, I guess, a kind of fun debate about whether or not it should be Mike White and Joe Flacco down the stretch until Zach Wilson's healthy.
Yes, let's debate that. No, I'm just kidding.
I think the easy answer is Joe Flacco, and you just kind of give the best chance to win. But again, I know I've been saying this since. I mean, listen, if Flacco is even that guy, right? But
White was 20 for 32, 200 yards, touchdown, 2 picks. Not awful against New England.
not awful. But I think Flacco could be a little bit better. He's played in a Jet system before,
That's
an
true.
Adam Gase
I forget
system,
about that.
but-
Yeah, that's true.
But he has played for the Jets before. But, I mean, this season's all been about Zach Wilson. It's all about his development. I've said it from the very beginning. Like, it doesn't matter whether or not you win games, as long as you create an environment for Wilson to develop and to thrive. And if Zach Wilson goes out, I just don't know what the season's about, man.
Yeah, and I think for those who might not know, Zach Wilson sprained posterior cruciate ligament. I
Eesh.
think that's the details of it in his knee. He's going to be out 2 to 4 weeks. So not season ending, but if I'm the Jets, I'm playing this on the ultra conservative side because there's, to me, I think that's really the question. I actually had the same question in my notes. What are you playing for at this point? I think that's really the big question because if you're evaluating those first 6 games, I think it's tough to say if you're pleased, if you're disappointed. I think ultimately you've seen the signs you need to see from Zach Wilson in a lot of ways at times. There was that one bright spot, that game against Tennessee, where everybody was through the roof at home, where he looked brilliant. And I think that's the promise that you're trying to get to. Clearly, the Jets are very far off from that. And I think nobody really expected them to be there at this point. So, as you mentioned, it's all about creating a cocoon for Zach Wilson, creating a place where he can thrive, he can develop, he can grow into the franchise quarterback the Jets need him to be. That's really the goal of this season. I don't think it's about wins. I don't think it's about any of that. And he was, I think you could say, on that path as the season was going along through 6 games, despite what the outcome said. So I'm with you now. I think at this point, it's not about the wins and losses. It's all about the rest of the team really getting its footing because the rest of this Jets team still has improvements to make. They have improvements to make on the defensive end, the wideouts, the running game, worst in the NFL. There's improvements to make there. That's, I think, what you really got to focus on is just growing as a team, building your system, regardless of who's at the quarterback, because Zach Wilson's not. And like you mentioned, that's kind of the one priority they should have this season.
I did joke, right? It doesn't matter who plays quarterback, but at the end of the day, you still want to give yourself the best chance to run a similar type of offense, still keep your system going because you still have other players to develop. None as important as Zach Wilson, but you still want this team to be competitive so that when Wilson returns, you're building towards something. That's kind of the big thing I've been saying is like the way they played against Tennessee, the way they sometimes battle. There's hope. There was hope for the future. There was a clear foundation. So I guess just with Wilson out, continue to build the pieces around that, make sure that they're still getting the development that they need because that's really all you can do.
And you can make the argument, though, they can develop Mike White. I think this is an interesting look. To me, this is the thing. We're joking about it. He's a backup making his first career start. Didn't play quarterback until high school. Yeah, I think it might have been a cross-country run or something of that nature. I don't remember exactly. Played college, USF, transferred to Southern Kentucky. Might have been Western Kentucky. I forget one of them. My notes are a little scattered here. But he was really good in his final 2 years of college. Had some terrific 1,000-yard seasons. Drafted by the Cowboys, released, signed to the Jets practice squad. Has been there ever since. Was decent in his first start. And I think, look, I mean, he's young enough where this is a guy who maybe can give you something. I know, obviously, there's not reason to believe that this is the game he does it, especially against the Cincinnati Bengals. But this is a guy, look, you see what you have, get the rest of the team developed around him, And ultimately, like you said, it gives Zach Wilson time to heal. I think that's really the key point here. We don't want to rush him back if you're the Jets. I think that would be a dangerous situation because, like you mentioned, nothing to play for. This is the Bills' division. You're not making the playoffs. I think giving him the time that he needs is the right route to take here. And look, let's see what Mike White gives you. I mean, he got his first touchdown against New England. He did it the first play, actually. First snap was a touchdown, so you got to give him some credit. I think it's going to be a fun game. I mean, if you just had what's your expectation for Mike White? Anything that you think, do you think the Jets have a chance against the Bengals or a chance down the stretch here in any which way to get some wins?
I mean, I'd have to, look at their schedule down the line. Definitely not against the Bengals. The Bengals are scary good.
They are.
And we
scary
can
good.
definitely have, discussion about where they stand, but they got the Colts after this, the Bills, the Dolphins. I mean, maybe if the Dolphins or the Colts have a really bad day. I do agree that, play Mike White because you know what Joe Flacco is.
Yes.
At this point, he's 39 years old. Like,
Yes.
Joe Flacco is not going to come out there and all of a sudden it's prime Joe Flacco and he all of a sudden, he's going to be your quarterback down the stretch. But shot in the dark, maybe you have something in Mike White. I don't think you should be expecting anything, but, crazier things have happened. There have been gems that come from random backups where, they become really good. So, I mean, I'd rather go with the unknown that has higher potential than the more certainty,
Sure.
but the guy that has just a low ceiling.
Yeah, and just to clear up a couple loose notes there about White, 12,903 yards during his 2 years at Western Kentucky. It was 63 touchdowns, 2 years with the program. Former baseball player, 9-2 record, 0.4 ERA in high school. So he did actually pick up football till very late in the game, but has been killing it so far. We'll see what happens this weekend. And yeah, I think it's really about the Cincinnati Bengals though, because this is a team that I should plug. JR Sportbrief was on campus actually earlier this week, and he was talking quite a bit about the Cincinnati Bengals. A very interesting situation, 5-2, top of the AFC North, really top of the AFC in a lot of ways. I mean, I think they have been probably the best-looking team so far, and that game against the Ravens, a lot of people thought was a litmus test. They passed it with flying colors, and they, to me, I don't know about you, Lou, they, to me, look like the best in the AFC so far. Am I buying that is a whole different question, but so far, through 7 games, very impressed with what Joe Burrow has done for that team.
No, absolutely. I think you look at that offense, and especially the way that, Burrow and Chase are playing, and you just have to love everything you're seeing. And coming into the season, wasn't sure what to expect. I had hopes. I believed in Joe Burrow. I thought this would be a competitive team. I didn't think that they were going to be this competitive.
No.
I was worried early in the, in the offseason that I was like, maybe too high on the Bengals. Like, they're still young. They're still developing. The O-line's trouble. But, I mean, they've been great. That's 41-17 is an absolute shellacking of the Baltimore Ravens. And a team that the Ravens had, I think, 5 straight wins going into that game were red hot.
They
just
did.
one of the AFC's best teams, a team that a lot of teams have trouble stopping, scored 41 and held them to 17. Like, that's huge. So
Yeah.
I still wouldn't say that I think they look the best in the AFC. I still think personally that the Bills look the best, but
Okay.
I would put the Bengals, from what we've seen so far, in the top 3 in terms of AFC.
Interesting point, because you look at the Bengals' numbers, 189 points for, 128 against. One of the teams, few teams, I think 2 others that are better than them. The Bills, only team to put up past 200 points, allow less than 100.
Yep.
So they're the only team that has been better than that in a lot of ways. They're only 4-2 though, and I think the thing that's interesting to me about the Bengals, the whole quarterback situation, we've seen Joe Burrow make that leap really, because I think last season and the time he was on the field, he looked excellent, and there was really no question that when he came back, he was going to be good. Reunite him with Jamar Chase, and it's a whole different story now. We're seeing how good he can be. We're seeing how good Justin Herbert can be. I got to shout him out. 4-2 Chargers, right there with the Raiders, who, boy, I'm not confident in the Raiders, obviously, with what's gone down there with John Gruden and another one of those unfortunate situations. And we'll get to the Chiefs in just a minute, but I like the Chargers a lot in the West, and we got these young quarterbacks really rising up, except in the AFC East, which is what the problem really has been for the Miami Dolphins. 1-6, they've been abysmal this year. This is going to sound nuts. We're talking about the Jets here. They're above the Dolphins in terms of positioning in that division. They're 1-5 compared to the 1-6 Dolphins. So you could argue the Jets are not in the worst of shapes right now, considering how other teams look and considering how drastic things have been with Zach Wilson struggling here and there. They're still in decent shape considering how good the rest of the AFC is. If Zach Wilson can become something special, I think this division is theirs potentially to make a run at it in a few years, because the Bills 4-2. I'm not thrilled about the Bills so far in the way they've looked. So I think that the Jets, you know what? You can't go too deep into what you've seen from them so far.
The big thing for the Bills for me, I think, is their defense.
Absolutely.
I've just been so in love with their defense. Their offense, I kind of expect a lot more from Josh Allen, because Josh Allen was the guy I thought should win the MVP this year. I thought coming off of a season last year where he was super, super good, that he would build on it and get even better. And that's not necessarily been the case, but their defense has been really strong. Again, the only team in the NFL to just not allow 100 points so far. So
Yeah.
really a strong defense. And the other team you mentioned, the Chargers, is the other team I'm comfortable putting ahead of the Bengals just because
Okay.
Justin Herbert's been amazing. I love the dynamic of that offense. I think the ugly loss to the Ravens maybe dampens.
Especially because the Bengals just ripped them.
Yeah,
So
so you look at that, and so maybe the data says that the Bengals are better than the Chargers. I'm not going to argue with you on that one because you can present a lot of facts. We just talked about those scores that would certainly support the Bengals. But just the feel I'm getting from the Chargers, I do have more faith in them. But I mean, don't fool around with the Bengals. The Bengals could easily, not easily, but I think could come in and win this AFC North. I don't believe in the Steelers at all.
So I want to talk about the Browns for a second because I think this is how I want to jump out and say you talked about the Bills were your team preseason. Cleveland Browns were mine, and I think it's not been exactly what you expected. Maybe that division, though, I think the Ravens. I agree with you, and the Steelers are the odd men out there. I like the Browns and Bengals. I don't know what you think about the Browns, but I think those are the two teams I kind of have my eye on really down the stretch here.
I'm higher on the Ravens than I am on the Browns.
Interesting. Okay.
Just because I think Lamar's been good. I think when that offense is right, with a solid defense, they can be tough to stop. But I truthfully don't buy in on the Ravens or the Browns. I think the Browns have been better than what I thought they were going to do, but there's something about that. I don't feel as confident as you do in their success down the stretch.
That's kind of the problem. The teams they've beaten: the Broncos unconvincingly 17-14, Vikings unconvincing 14-7, the Texans they lost to the Chiefs, lost to the Chargers in that absolute shootout, and they lost to the Cardinals. So the three teams that are at the top of the AFC. I mean, I don't know if you want to lump the Chiefs into that conversation, but the teams that are at the top of the AFC have really gotten the Browns' numbers so far. But we'll see. It's early, 7 games, a lot to go. A lot of good teams in general in the AFC, and we will see what happens. One of those teams not so good right now is the Kansas City Chiefs, as I just mentioned, 3-4 on the year, and they head in to take on the New York Giants. Man, you're a Giants fan. I'm thrilled about this game. This is not even just for radio here. This is an exciting game because the Chiefs are not good right now. They're really not. I mean, in terms of Super Bowl champion good, they're barely mediocre good. And I think to face a Giants team now who there's only one game separating the two, and I got to be honest, the Giants are coming off a great win. The Chiefs are coming off not so pretty of a loss. This is an interesting game. I wonder where you're sitting on this one right now.
Well, you said mediocre. First, let's just talk about the teams that have the same record as the Chiefs.
Oh, here we go. I'm excited about this.
The Denver Broncos.
Okay.
The New England Patriots.
Okay.
The Indianapolis Colts, Chicago Bears, Carolina Panthers, who the Giants just beat in a great game, right? Those are the teams with the same record as the Kansas City Chiefs. You look at those teams, you go, which team is not like the others? It should be the Chiefs. The Chiefs are the team that, coming off a trip to the Super Bowl, should be very good. Their offense is supposed to be a world beater. Their defense, but their defense is supposed to be competitive. It's not. But yeah, the Chiefs have had a really tough year, and you look at the teams they've lost to: Baltimore, Buffalo, Los Angeles Chargers, Tennessee Titans. Good teams, but teams that the Chiefs should be able to beat because they're supposed to be the best team, or at least one of the best teams in the AFC. They probably believe that they're the best team in the AFC going into this season. And they've lost to the other teams that are trying to vie for that spot. So Kansas City's low, man. They're coming off 27-3 loss to the Titans. Listen, you can lose to the Titans. They only put up 3 against the Titans. Their defense isn't great. And to just really have a bad day against the Titans team that, to put it nicely, I still think is one-dimensional. Derrick Henry's awesome, but their passing offense, Tannehill hasn't been good. They're not getting the ball to Brown or Julio Jones. So to lose that bad to the Titans and for the Giants to come off with the momentum they have against a solid win against the Panthers, turned it up in the second half. I know I said it in the intro. Maybe that was bad form by me. I think that the Giants should be able to win this game.
So here's the thing about the Chiefs, too. You mentioned the defense, and I think that's ultimately where the problem lies because their offense last season averaged just under 415 yards per game. Best in the NFL. This year, 419 yards. Third in the NFL. There's been no real dip there. I mean, the point production hasn't been there, but there's been no real dip. You look at a week like last week. Patrick Mahomes, QBR, you know what his QBR was? 6.1, the lowest of his career. It was abysmal. And he has at least one turnover in each of his last 6 games, multiple turnovers each of his past 3. So the issue here is when the offense fades away, when Mahomes fades away, they've got nothing because that defense has really not been good enough this year. They've allowed over 200 points on the year. So meet the New York Giants. And I think this is really where things get so fascinating because the Giants, they're knocked out. They're banged up right now. Let's be honest with that. They are missing a lot of key pieces. Saquon Barkley, he's not even practicing yet. They're also missing Kenny Golladay still. They're starting to see progress from Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, Kadarius Toney as limited participants in practice, but this is not the full-strength Giants. Even then, They went out and defeated the Panthers pretty handily, like you mentioned. And I have to agree with you. It's going to sound nuts. I think the Giants have a very good chance to win this football game because, look, I mean, they've been convincing. They've been competitive in a good amount of games this year. They're facing a Chiefs team who they might be reared up. They might be at home. I still think the Giants have a good shot here to put up a competitive battle for no real reason other than I just think it could happen. I mean, they're coming off a good win. I think they're facing a team that really doesn't want to. They don't want to place a team with a lot of energy right now because the Chiefs don't have that. And I think the Giants, they might bring that to the table when they go on the road.
The one thing that scares me with this Giants team is the last couple of years, no matter what, their games are always kind of competitive, barring like last week when they win big, but like they never take advantage of like poor defenses.
That's
like,
true.
Atlanta game this year, they put up like 14 points, maybe. I forget what the exact score of that game was, but they never put up points against the defenses I feel like they should take advantage of, but their defense is usually pretty good at stepping up against offenses that are pretty good. And I look at the way their defense played last week against the Panthers.
That's the
especially
thing.
a guy like Azeez Ojulari,
Yep.
rookie, came out, got the stats right in front of me, 2.5 sacks, 4 QB hits, 8 total pressures. And the front four, which has kind of been the one problem, I think, in the Giants' defense, even when they took the big step last year. Their secondary was great last year, even their linebacker crew was great. I looked for that front four besides Leonard Williams last year to step up, and now Leonard Williams starting to get more consistent at getting to the quarterback. Mahomes does not deal with pressure that well. I think one of the reasons that the Bucs were able to win that Super Bowl last year was that they got to Mahomes every single time. The Chiefs' O-line's not as strong as it's been in past years, so I think you see that D-line continue to get pressure. The key for me is the defense, really, because at the end of the day, the Chiefs still have Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Try and stop one of them, because I think one of them's probably going to have a decent day, but try and limit one of them.
I agree that it's about the defense because the Giants' defense, you mentioned, top 10 in the league last season. They were bottom 10 through the first 6 games of the season. That changed against Carolina in a lot of ways. They held the Panthers 2.79 yards per play. That's the lowest mark they've had since 2010. Third lowest in the NFL this season. Is that going to be an anomaly or is that going to be the norm is the question. The Chiefs, a tough team to do it against. But they've also, the Giants, forced a lot of turnovers. As you mentioned, if you can get the pressure on Patrick Mahomes, who has been turning the ball over lately, that could be a really bad recipe for the Chiefs. And I don't want to make it sound like we're very confident in the Giants here. That's not at all what we're saying here. But what we are saying is this is a Giants team that can be competitive. They've been competitive for a lot of this year. I think Joe Judge laid down the law. He knew that the team wasn't good enough, quite frankly. They put away a lot of that last week against Carolina. Question if you can keep it going against the Chiefs. If I had to put my money on it right now, I'm taking the New York Giants. I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm so excited about this is because I looked at some of these games on the schedule and I went, oh boy, Rams, Chiefs, Buccaneers.
Yeah, this is not a scary game.
These are losses probably. All of a sudden to be in the spot looking at this game and going, it wouldn't be crazy if the Giants pulled off a win is kind of why I'm so excited. So absolutely, I believe that they could come here and win this game.
Another interesting note, too, they lead the all-time series quite a bit against the Chiefs, 11-3 all-time against them. They haven't played since 2017. Ben McAdoo, the head coach, said the Giants won 12-9, so a very different Chiefs team. But look, the Giants have had their number for a good amount of time here, and I think the question is, we talked about what the Jets have to play for. It's an interesting question what the Giants have to play for, because without a doubt, the Dallas Cowboys have been the best team in the division, 5-1, winning 5 straight games. It's a mosh pile after that. You have Washington 2-5, Philly 2-5, the Giants 2-5. I'm very confident in saying the Giants are the best team of those 3. I don't think they can compete with the Cowboys, who I've never been high on, but 5-1's a big gap to overcome, and the Cowboys have looked very, very good this year with Dak Prescott back and ready to go.
Yeah, I think you can kind of kiss goodbye any hopes of winning the division. This
Certainly.
is not going to be the NFC least like it was last year. Dallas is a very good team. It pains me to say it, but Dallas is very good. Their offense, it's fantastic. They're playing well. But the one thing that interests me, and it is still kind of a long shot, but the NFC is kind of top heavy. You have a lot of strong division winners. You have the Cowboys at 5-1, Cardinals at 7-1, Packers at 7-1, Bucks at 6-1. Then the only strong wild card team is the Rams at 6-1. Then the second best team is the Saints at 4-2. Giants beat the Saints.
Yeah,
so
I'm not buying the Saints.
If
no.
you can just continue to win games, I don't think it's completely unrealistic to say that you maybe hang around that wild card pack, especially I think 3 wild card teams make it now with the new structure in the NFL. So maybe you slide into one of those bottom NFL wild card spots. So I don't think it's really unrealistic, but it's still something you should play for.
You're right about top heavy though.
The NFC is very, very top heavy in the sense that the division winners might already have it locked down, and now we're going to see teams playing for wild card spots in every division besides the NFC West. So I think no matter what, the
this is
Giants should
interesting.
continue to play competitive games because, again, a prove-it year for Daniel Jones. I think he's shown that he can be the franchise QB. I've loved what I've seen from him so far. So just continue to win games and see what happens, I think, is the best mode for the Giants. Because this isn't a Giants team that should just be like, not focus on winning games. You want to see good play. No, this is, let's try and win some games and see what we can do.
It's different than the Jets. I think the Jets were not concerned about wins and losses. I think the Giants, you do need to start seeing wins because last season they were, a 7-9 team, whatever it was, 6-10. Now this season, they're a better football team this year. Daniel Jones has been a better player this year. You need better results, and I think there's no question about that. And look, let's be honest. Those first few games of the season, there was a few points deciding a win and loss there. That goes differently. They could have a 500 record right now, without a doubt. If one field goal goes this way, one field goal goes that way. Very different situation, I think, we'd have for the Giants. And you bring up an interesting point when it comes to the playoff picture here because Packers locked up the North. South, Saints don't have a chance. Bucks locked up the South. Cardinals, Rams, that's a dogfight out in the West. Beyond that, it's a lot of mediocre football teams. So I think you have an interesting point there. If the Giants do what they did last year, turn it on late, who knows what we're looking at here. Should be a lot of fun. My final line, though, Giants over the Chiefs this week. I'm not going to give a score. That's a little too difficult for me. But look, even in this dilapidated state the Giants are in, if we think they have a shot against the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't know if that says more about the Giants or says more about the Chiefs. I'll let you all decide. But we're going to keep it going with the New York Giants because we've got a special interview, a little bit of our off-the-air conversation with Paul Dottino. Nobody knows the New York Giants better than him. We asked him a question at the end of this interview, what he thinks about the Giants. He wasn't so thrilled about them, but maybe it's a different tune now. I don't know. This was a little bit of a while ago, and he knows the team better than anybody else. We'll get into his roots here at WFUV and that long career covering the New York Giants right after this break. One-on-one, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. Stick around.
This week on Off the Air, Paul Dottino.
Another episode of Off the Air diving into the legacy of WFUV Sports with some of its most prominent alumni. And our pleasure to welcome the reporter for the New York Giants for WFAN and MSG Networks and play-by-play reporter for Northeast Conference on ESPN3, CBS Sports Network, Fordham class of 1986, Paul Dottino. Paul, thanks so much for taking some time to talk with us today. How are you?
Great to talk to you guys. Doing well. Hope the same for you.
For sure. We appreciate you coming on and hashing out a little bit of your Fordham experience with us. This is always such a pleasure to be able to go through this with our alumni. And I just wanted to start with, why did you want to come to Fordham and when did you know you wanted to be a part of the radio station at WFUV?
Well, that was actually a real easy choice for me because ever since I was 5 years old, my goal was to be a sportscaster. Always actually wanted to be a broadcaster who was going to be involved covering the New York Giants. It turned out that that's what I'm doing. Thank God for that. But it was carefully and meticulously planned. You see, outside of maybe a month or so when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, that was the 1 month I kind of wanted to be an astronaut. And then I started thinking to myself, what if I went up to the moon or got lost in space and couldn't make it back to Earth? And then I said quickly, no. Giant sportscaster's a better plan. So really my whole life, that was the idea. So I knew when I was in school, in high school, that I was going to go locally. I was not going to leave the New York metropolitan area. And I was like, well, let's see, what college has the best communications radio station in the area that's going to give me a chance to stay here and try to dig my path somehow into covering the New York Football Giants. And it was a really easy choice. It was WFUV, Fordham. It was WSOU, Seton Hall. potentially a far distant on the depth chart was going to be Montclair State University in New Jersey, which has a much better communications department now than it did then back in the early 80s, or potentially WFDU Fairleigh Dickinson University. Those were really the William Patterson over in New Jersey also had a pretty decent communications department, and at WPSU, I believe, was their call letters. So it was easy for me. I was going to go to a college that had a radio station that was going to allow me the college experience to able to cover the Giants. And I figured if I could do that, somehow I would parlay it into a career. So that was the reason. Fordham was by far my number one choice. Charlie Slows, who, as you guys probably know, is now the Washington Nationals play-by-play guy. He was the sports director when I first got to WFUV. And I used to listen to Charlie and Mike Breen all the time on one-on-one. And I said, my God, these guys are the best. I really need to go there. So Fordham was the runaway decision for me. And as soon as I got that acceptance letter, bang, that was going to happen. There's no way I was even going to hesitate. So let me make that clear. That's why Fordham was the choice. Now, you must understand something. Because I'm a very meticulous planner, when I got there, I immediately tried to find out, what do I need to do now? Not only to get into the radio station, but how can I make sure that I get on the air as soon as possible? And how can I carve out my way as somebody who's going to get out to these events so that I can do the interviews? I can have the experience of being at the events. I can connect with people, okay? And in addition to that, I wanted to make sure that I learned my craft. See, I'm one of those people who believes you don't learn a lot by looking at the books or looking at the blackboards. I think especially in this business, you need to do it. And so what I wanted to do was to make sure that I got out, and I aggressively pursued WFUV sports as if it was a class. That was my major. I tell people all the time, I didn't go to Fordham University. I went to WFUV because I was there nonstop. If I wasn't in class, I was at the radio station or I was at a game covering it and either doing the game for WFUV or writing sports for the paper. I don't know. Is the paper still there? I know the Ram is still there.
I'm the sports editor at the Fordham Rams, so I don't know about the paper. I don't know about the paper.
The paper was the alternate. We had two still newspapers in those days. And Jack Curry was the sports editor of the Ram, okay? And he was there, and I was over at the paper. So that's what I did. And I devoted a tremendous amount of my time to my craft at WFUV because I felt like that was time well spent. My parents always said to me, I could have gotten at least one grade point average higher when I graduated, but I traded in a grade point average for the hours that I spent at FUV learning my craft, going out to Nets and Devils games and covering those games, and going out to Giants practice. I covered the New Jersey Generals for 3 years in the USFL. I was at those practices every week. I covered every home game. Herschel Walker was my first ever interview as a member of WFUV Sports in the spring of 1983. And I'll never forget it. I sat by his locker. We did a one-on-one. I did the interview, and he thanked me after the interview. I'll never forget that. It was one of the highlights of my college career at Fordham. And so I don't know if that completely answers your question, but I think it probably does most of it.
That definitely does. And we hit on there a lot of why you came to Fordham. And I'm so curious that you said from age 5, you knew that the New York Giants was the team that you wanted to cover. Take us through the Giants fandom. Where did that come from? Why was that the team that you wanted to cover at WFUV?
Well, my dad was a Giants fan, and I grew up listening to a transistor radio, my little black Panasonic transistor radio. And when I was 5 years old back in 1969, I can tell you, I still remember listening to Marty Glickman and Chip Sapola and Sam Huff, doing Giants games on 1130 WNEW. And, Tarkenton was the quarterback. And, it was I was immediately attracted to it like a magnet. I'm like, wow, listening to the Giants on the radio, this is awesome. I've got to do this. I got to be part of this somehow. And it was just ingrained in me for whatever reason. It was ingrained in me. And I will tell you, Mortal Harmon was the Jets play-by-play guy at the time. And he would, did Jets games with Sam DeLuca. Although I don't think Sam was initially on the color at that moment in time. I forget who the color analyst was in 69. But Merle Harmon was an outstanding announcer in his own right. I thought the Giants and Jets just had the best of the best in NFL play-by-play guys on the radio in those days. But it was always Marty and the Giants are number one. And Merle Harmon's really great, but he's doing the Jets. No. I don't want to do that. I'm doing the Giants. And that's just the way it was. So that was my goal from the very, very beginning. And I knew that as long as I stayed in the area, and if I was aggressive enough, see, WFUV did not have beat reporters at the time on the teams. So I created the beat. I told them, I said, look, I'm going to go to Giants training camp once a week. I'm going to go to practice during the season once a week. I'm going to go to these games. I planned my college classes around practice. Okay, let me make something clear, fellas. I'm going to say this very slowly one more time. I had to take my required courses for communications. That's true. But I made sure that when I took my electives every semester, either in the fall during the Giants season or in the spring during the New Jersey Generals season, I purposely took electives that worked around the schedule so that I could hustle back from the Bronx to the Meadowlands and be at Giants practice or Generals practice and do post-practice interviews, because that was more important to me than any class I was going to get at the university. And I know the educators don't want to hear that, but it's the truth. And I'm not sorry I did it.
Talking to Paul Dottino, Giants beat reporter for WFAN. Paul, is there a moment, whether it be big or small, as you have gone on into your professional career covering the Giants, that you felt like, had I not had these experiences at WFUV, or if I had not gone through this challenge, struggle, this really amazing experience, whatever it might be, that you felt like you maybe wouldn't have been equipped to handle something that came your way down the line?
Oh, I felt that way every day. I knew that if I did not create that Giants beat reporter position at WFUV, had WFUV not been accepting of me to do that, then I honestly don't know if this dream of mine ever would have happened. I think about that every day. That's where it started. It was all about the Giants' willingness to allow me to come out and prove myself as worthy. And as soon as they gave me that opportunity, I jumped on it, and I've never looked back. And I appreciate it every single day. I never forget it. Look, that's clearly the highlight of my career at WFUV, beyond a shadow of a doubt. But I will also tell you, and this may be a little bit more to home for you guys, back in the fall of 1985, I wound up winning the award for Best College Sportscast from the New York Sportscasters Association. WAER, the Syracuse station. We don't like to talk about them very much, but I know they're up there somewhere. They used to dominate the awards from the Associated Press for college sportscast. And one of my most proud moments at FUV was in the spring of '85. I had put together a reel. You had to put together 3 sportscasts and submit them for best college sportscast. And I remember, putting it together and submitting it. And everybody was like, well, Syracuse wins every year. I was like, I don't care. I'm doing this. And I did. And wouldn't you know, in September of '85, when the awards came out, it was the WFUV Sportscast that won it. And I remember the Ram, speaking of your paper, the Ram had a nice blurb in it. And as they were listing the awards that FUV had won from the Associated Press that year in radio, they made a specific note that WAER dominates the sportscast competition. But this year, WFUV's Paul Dottino wound up knocking off their streak. So that's another very proud moment for me from FUV. But so, yes, I have tremendous memories of the station. It means the world to me.
We've got the archives. I got to look back in the 80s and find that blurb and bring it back to life. But Paul, one thing I wanted to ask you too about the Giants, you mentioned getting the beat reporting experience as a college student and now doing it for 39 seasons. What would you think, or what would you say is the biggest change that you've maybe seen in the role of a beat reporter, and how you've kind of evolved over those almost 4 decades now to continue covering the team and continue doing it the way that you know is proper over these years?
Yeah, well, you have to understand it's not necessarily as much the role of the beat reporter, it's the role of the media in general. You know, when I started covering the team, Bill Parcells, again, was the head coach, and everything was old school. You know, obviously from Coach Parcells, George Young was the general manager, and you went to practice. You got to watch the full 2-hour practice every day. Then you got to talk to the players, and there was a much more friendly relationship, because see, Parcells had a rule. If you were one of the guys on the beat, you could come to practice every day and watch the entire practice. And Bill's rule was simple. If you reported a lineup change or anything about a trick play, not only were you going to be kicked out of practice, but the entire press corps was going to be kicked out of practice. You see, Bill was smart because he trusted the press corps to police itself. Because let's face it, let's say myself or the guy from the Daily News or the New York Post had double-crossed the rules. Well, then all of us would have been kicked out, and we all would have hated on that guy. So we all knew that we were going to follow the coach's rules if we wanted to stay. It was really simple. You want to watch practice every day? You want to be amenable and get along with everybody? Follow the rules. Today, that's not the case. The media has a very antagonistic relationship with the organizations. They are ruled, they're the enemy. Now, even though Parcells used to joke and call us communist subversives, he always used to joke about it. He couldn't coach today because there is so much of an adversarial relationship between the media and the organizations. It's incredibly nasty, because what the media wants to do, they want to create interest. How do they create interest or create ratings or create clicks for their internet site? They just inflame the negative and talk about anything that's going to create controversy so that they can be part of the story and they can create interest in their own organization. They're not interested in facts. They're interested in first. The media today, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, especially of the new generation, they're more interested in getting something out there first, even if it's wrong, because they're rarely held accountable. The internet has done that. Twitters, blogs, podcasts, there's no accountability. You could say whatever you want, whether it's true or not, whether it's a totally unsubstantiated rumor or not. It doesn't matter. You can publish it, or you can put it out over a speaker. And that's the biggest difference. In the old days, you had to have 2 confirmed sources for anything that you went with in print or over the air. And you were damn sure that you had it before you put it out there. Did you want to be first? Sure. If you could be first, great. But you knew that you could research it and you could really be good at what you did in terms of trying to confirm before you went with it. And you also knew that there was going to be a news cycle to where if you were in broadcast, the newspapers weren't going to be able to print it until tomorrow morning. Now, because of the 24-hour news cycle and everything is within 0.3 seconds, it's on Twitter, well, that changed everything. The bad news is more media people today want to be first instead of right. And they're never held accountable, which is why there is so much wrong, so many errors, and so many mistakes made in today's media. There's not enough attention paid to journalistic integrity or getting stuff right. And my niche and the way that I've always done it is the old school way. I believe that it's not important to be first, it's important to be right. And my niche is analysis and knowledge, because it doesn't matter if something goes up on Twitter 10 minutes ago. If 10 minutes later, I can either tell you that it was true or false, and if it's true, I can explain to you what the implications are. That's a hell of a lot more important to me and my audience than some bozo who just put it up 10 minutes ago on Twitter, but doesn't know his toes from his fingers. That's how I approach the job, and that's how a dinosaur like me is still able to do what I do 39 years later.
Paul, you mentioned how you're approaching the job and that it is 39 years later. If you could go back to creating that beat while you were at Fordham and WFUV, with the understanding that you would be still at it almost 4 decades after the fact, what would your reaction have been to get the opportunity to do this for so long?
It was always a dream come true. It was planned. I mean, I live within 15 minutes of the Meadowlands. The big key for me was that they built Giants Stadium. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know if the Giants had stayed at Yankee Stadium all these years or if they had gone somewhere else. I don't necessarily know if I would have gotten the chance. But see, no one at WFUV when I was there at the time showed any interest in doing what I wanted to do. Part of the reason was there was nobody else who lived as close to the Meadowlands as I did. Since I lived so close to the Meadowlands and I was a commuter and I didn't mind driving over to Rose Hill every single day back and forth, to me, that was a small price to pay, but I had no competition. There was nobody who was going to be able to do what I do because A, I live closer to the stadium than anybody else. B, I was willing to do it as a commuter. And C, I was willing to plan my classes around practice. This was all planned, fellas. Nobody was going to beat me out on this. So, you know, it was all part of the game plan. And to this day, my game plan is still, I want to be on the Giants beat for 50 consecutive seasons. That's my goal. I'm only in season 39. So I still have quite a long ways to go to get to 50. Now, after I get to 50 years on the beat, look, if they get 10 buses and tie a rope around my waist and try to pull me away, maybe they'll have a small chance to pull me away. Maybe, but I'll probably go longer than that.
FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVsports.org.
Oh, we're back. One-on-one, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. What a fun interview. Paul Dottino. Yeah, what do you think of that? 39 years on the New York Giants beat. Wants to go 50. 50.
What a guy. You want to talk about good quotes. The one about the buses, the 10 buses pulling them in different directions.
You know what? It's probably
enough.
True. I actually believe it, too. I mean, just an incredible career. It all started at WFUV. And I just want to take a moment because I think you get so much perspective from a conversation like that because we're joined in the studio now by our good friend Jack Roche, who we'll listen to in just a little bit, our NetsBeat reporter. And you just think about all those things that we take for granted now that somebody like Paul started. Really had to be the guy to break down that barrier for FUV and make it happen and get into that Giants locker room is a really special thing. And big thanks to him for taking the time to talk about it with us on Off the Air. The podcast out now. We'll have a lot more coming there soon. But that's all for the NFL. Time for the NBA. And we're going to start with the team that's capturing the gaze of New York City, the one and only New York Knickerbockers. 4-1, first in the Atlantic, first in the Eastern Conference by tiebreaker. And I'm going to start with a simple question, Mr. Lou Orlando. ESPN headline, is it time to believe in the Knicks?
Well, that's right. So in the intro, I jokingly said that they were playing like a finals caliber team. And I did that to piss you off because I remember a couple days ago.
I don't get that dramatic here.
Well, when you were laughing at the Knicks fans that were saying, we're going to the finals.
I'm laughing at that, yes.
Yeah. obviously, I'm not ready to take it to that level, but I absolutely do believe that the Knicks are for real because I think you look at the brand of basketball they're playing, and it's just clean and crisp right off the bat. And we talk about the impact of Coach Tom Thibodeau, and it's just so clear in the way they've played so far. 4-1, that one loss coming, tough one to Orlando in overtime. So I love what I've seen from this team so far. I think the energy is exactly what you want if you're a Knicks fan.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned there about Tom Thibodeau is important because I think when we saw last year, this was a team that was built on what? Energy, hustle, enthusiasm. They're never going to get outworked by anybody. That gets you to a certain point. That gets you to the 4th seed in the East in the regular season. Mm-hmm. What happens in the playoffs? Everybody's working hard. So that all of a sudden that advantage kind of goes away. The team bows out in the first round to the Atlanta Hawks. So what do you need to do then? If you're the Knicks, what do? You get more talent, right? That's what you do. They get Kemba Walker. They get Evan Fournier. I didn't know if these guys would be guys that would ultimately tip the scales for the Knicks, but boy, it's been impressive early. I mean, this is a different New York Knicks team. There's a different identity. They're scoring the ball more. They're shooting the ball terrific from deep, and they're being led by Walker in a lot of ways. That point guard that they needed, a kid coming home to New York. I mean, it's been impressive to see two things. Number one, the Knicks making smart moves. They didn't go overboard like another team, the Chicago Bulls, that we'll get to. They made subtle moves to fill their needs, and they're capitalizing on it. They're playing a really good brand of basketball, like you mentioned, Lou, and because of that, top of the East right now, even though it's early.
Could I make a comparison to a team we talked about earlier in
Let's
baseball, the Atlanta Braves?
That's
right?
That's fair.
Right?
All right, that's fair.
A team that maybe didn't make the flashy moves, wasn't initially received well, but right, that Knicks offseason, I think there was some criticisms. Why would you give that much money to Fournier? Why would you signing D Rose is a great move? Why would you give him that much money? So kind of these questions, but I like what they did. Right, they brought back a lot of key pieces. Nerlens Noel, guys like that, guys that played a huge part either off the bench or in a fringe starting role, and then they went out, they got guys like Kemba Walker and Fournier especially, right? One of the problems with the Knicks last year was that they couldn't shoot the three consistently, so they got Fournier, a guy that can shoot the three consistently, and you get Kemba some stability at the point guard position. So I think they went out, they addressed their needs, and it's paying off for them.
The three-point shooting is insane, actually, because that's obviously where the NBA is trending today. The Knicks last year, Walker and Rose, through the first game so far, combined for 33s. They had all of 29 last season, the Knicks, from that position alone. They passed that total in 5 games.
Oh my God.
I mean, are you kidding me? That's insane. 81 made threes on the year, most of any team in the NBA, and we would not characterize the Knicks as a shooting team. I don't think you would. I would not describe them as a shooting team.
That was one of their weaknesses last year. Was you better hope that you find someone that can get hot, because it was just about maybe Burks gets hot or maybe quickly goes on a run. There wasn't that consistent shooter. I was like, all right, he's shooting from three. That's a like knockdown three every time.
I mean, look at these numbers from deep. Kemba Walker, 58% from deep, 54.5% from Rose. Randall's at around 30, Fournier at 42%, and Alec Burks 40%, 39, excuse me, to be specific here. I know people will get up in arms over 1%, but that's really that's what we're seeing from the Knicks. Some incredible shooting, some incredible scoring. Walker's giving you 14 a game. Fournier's giving you 17 a game. And you're seeing growth from this is the thing I want to focus on, too. You're also seeing growth from the guys you need to see growth from. That's something we cannot lose sight of. R.J. Barrett is becoming the shooting guard that you need. Obi Toppin, credit to him, man. Second-year jump has been very good. Mitchell Robinson now healthy, a contributing piece to that lineup. And you got the rookies as well that are starting to make an impact. So I think really for the Knicks, it's two-pronged. Number one, you're seeing the changing system. You're seeing the addition of the guys that you added in the offseason, and you're seeing the growth of the guys that you need to grow also happening as well. And for that reason, 4-1 start, exactly what you expected. The big question I think everybody has, easy to overreact, is it sustainable? That's the question I don't know, because the East is a very talented conference right now.
That's the thing, is that you look at the East, and there's just so many teams. You look at the Bucks, reigning champs. Nets are a powerhouse.
And they're not even in that top 4 right now. That's the thing we've got to realize.
They're not in the top 4 right now.
The Bulls, the Hornets, and the Wizards are.
Yeah, right.
I
so
mean,
I look at a team like the Hawks, right, that dismantled the Knicks in the postseason with Trae Young, could absolutely do something. The Hornets, the Bulls, the teams like the Celtics and Sixers that should be good aren't playing well. But there's just so many teams in the East. I think the thing that's impressive to me, at least, the Knicks are beating good teams, or at least teams that on paper have talent. Celtics and 76ers not necessarily playing well, but teams that have a lot of talent have been around for a while.
They can beat you on any given day.
Snapped a 15-game losing streak against the Sixers, which is a long losing streak in basketball, by the way. So, I mean, beating teams that they don't normally beat. The Bulls on paper might be a better team than the Knicks. At least their starting 5. Their starting 5 is kind of scary. So for the Knicks to go out there and beat them, and now the Bulls game, the reason the Bulls game was kind of enlightening to me, it should slow down any talks about the Knicks being like a lock for like playoff domination, or they're going to win the East, because that was a game they should have had kind of in the bag, up almost like 10 points, 2 minutes left to go, and just kind of completely collapsed, almost blew that one. I think if the Bulls gave that one away more than the Knicks won that one in the final 2 minutes. So not necessarily all there yet. So still time to temper some expectations, but also be excited.
I'm happy you brought up the Bulls, too, because I feel like in the offseason conversations, this is the team that the Knicks have most directly been compared to. Teams that both bolstered up in the offseason were good last year. Knicks obviously more ahead of the curve. Bulls did more in the offseason. I've been very, very high on the Chicago Bulls for so much of this year because I think that starting five, DeMar DeRozan, Vucevic, Ball, Levine, that four, the core four right there, is as good as anyone in the East. Obviously, Williams going down for what looks like the season is going to hurt them tremendously. But you saw it was a 104-103 game. Those are two teams that are very, very even. And I think they're going to be interesting to watch that story as it develops as the year goes along. I'm not looking at the Eastern standings too much right now. The Nets, they're the 10 seed. The Celtics are the 12 seed. The Sixers are the 8 seed. The Hawks are the 7 seed. The Bucks are the 6. Let's not get up in arms here. I mean, the Wizards are not that good. The Miami Heat, they're good.
I didn't even mention them when we talked about the good teams in the East. There are so many you tend to forget some.
So I'm a Heat fan. The backup jersey option today was the Jimmy Butler light blue Miami Vice jersey. Kept it at home. But they're for real this year, 4-1. There's no question about it. And I think the rest of this Eastern Conference is going to be very, very interesting. And one team right in the thick of that, the Brooklyn Nets. So let's bring in, folks, I mean, a round of applause. I mean, this is Jack Roche, ladies and gentlemen, in the studio with us. 3-man crew. This has been a long time since we've been able to do this, Mr. Roche. It's a lot of fun to have you here.
Thank you for having me on. First, I wanted to say I was at the Heat-Nets game the other night.
A lot of Heat fans, right?
A lot of Heat fans. I heard a lot of "Let's go Heat," not enough "Let's go Nets."
That would be because the Knicks are New York's team, but carry on.
I'm not refuting that at all. I'm just going to say that.
Alex said something earlier in the intro.
See, that's past us now. That's past us now. We're talking about the Knicks.
We missed that episode.
All right. Well, we could talk about it off air. But what I will say is that everyone talks about Kyle Lowry with the Heat.
Yeah.
And the other night, Heat played the Nets. 5 players scored in double digits for the Heat. Kyle Lowry only had 9. So it's not just him. This whole team is clicking. And for a team like the Nets, that means trouble.
The East is really, really good right now. I don't think we can overlook this word. That we're talking about 4 teams right now: the Knicks, the Heat, the Wizards. Let's not make jokes about the Wizards. They're a playoff team. Let's not kid ourselves here.
Like a 10.
They're a playoff
with
team.
The expanded,
play-in team.
Yeah, there we go.
The Bulls are a playoff team. The Hornets are a playoff team, and the Bucks and Hawks and all these other teams are on the outside looking into that right now. And the Nets, man, what an interesting start to the season. We talked about this before, where you said you're almost becoming a bit of a Nets enthusiast because there's a story every week with this team. I mean, what's the story that's on your mind right now about this team?
I definitely would have to mention LaMarcus Aldridge last night, not just putting up 17 points in the second half, but becoming part of the exclusive 20,000-point career total, which I think they mentioned there are only 7 active players with that. And I'd name the list, but it's who you'd expect. It's LeBron James, it's Carmelo Anthony, it's Chris Paul. And when you've got him going, you're so used to seeing that deep 2-pointer from LaMarcus Aldridge. And last night, it was really easy to call him the 3rd best scorer on the team. And going forward without Kyrie Irving, I think you're going to see him kind of slide into that role. And, the Nets roster is, there are a lot of uncertainties. And I saw a Nets reporter last night joking that I think Javon Carter or Bruce Brown is their best roller, and the defense, there are a lot of holes there. But when they look on, I don't see a team better than them. And it was so reassuring to see James Harden pull out one of his vintage performances last night, 29 points. He joked the other night that he wasn't going to be in the 30s, 40s club, and then put up 29, so almost there. But the thing that stands out for me is 19 free throw attempts, and he's kind of been that poster boy of the foul rule, and calls are down dramatically this year. But last night, you saw him getting to the line with ease, and that really comes, his words, not mine, from being aggressive. So, if you're a Nets fan, that's something that you really want to see out of James Harden, who has struggled at times this year.
So a lot of the notes Jack Roche hit on right now were talked about in the post-game sound that you were a part of. So if we could, let's try to get a little bit of LaMarcus Aldridge, James Harden, and all those guys from the post-game sound last night.
Yeah, I tried to hit it off the backboard, but I still shouldn't even have did that. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought I was at the gym by myself in a pickup game, not an NBA game. I can't do that. I could have cost my team a game. but it won't happen again. I hope so.
And were you surprised you didn't get ejected? The rules, I think, are pretty clear with that.
I didn't know you could get ejected off of that, but I'm glad I stayed into the game. I'm sure a hefty fine is coming. Well, I don't mind giving this. I'm sure somebody in the NBA office is going to use that towards the college fund, so I don't mind.
I think Kev hit me on 2 back-to-back jump shots, or I think Patty and then Kev hit me, and then they called timeout. And I was sitting there with Kev, and I was like, man, I need one more bucket for $20K. He said, I want to pass it to you. But then, they ended up trapping him or whatever. I wasn't there. But I knew. That's why, when I hit the shot, I kind of looked over at Kev and started laughing.
It's just me being aggressive. The first couple games wasn't aggressive. I was aggressive at spurts, but just trying to be aggressive for 4 quarters. And I had that burst, that speed of just getting to my spots, whether it's getting to the basket or shooting my shot. So, I felt pretty good out there for an entire game.
James, at the last game, you talked about patience before you get to, being a 30, 40 guy a night. You had 29 tonight. How'd you feel out there?
I wasn't 30. No, I'm just
So in order to give you the sound there, Kevin Durant, LaMarcus Aldridge talking about getting 20,000, and a couple from James Harden about that aggressive mindset Jack talked about, and then about being short of that 30-point club. And yeah, obviously LaMarcus Aldridge, have to take a second and talk about him because, he didn't step away from basketball because of loss of love for the game or a loss of talent. He stepped away for obviously an unfortunate health circumstance that he addressed and made a very, very smart decision. And now coming back, a little reminder of how good of a player he is. Obviously the 20,000 club is extraordinary. 21 and 8 last night, 10 to 16 from the field. Dude was an all-star for a reason, so we'll see how much he can give you this season. But the thing that was awesome to me about that collection of sound, the one that we started with, was Kevin Durant throwing the ball into the stands. And Lou, I find this really funny because even on a night where so much went right, 20,000, terrific, wonderful, 105-98 win at home, wonderful Friday night. Always something. There's always something about these Nets, and that silly incident was the one last night.
Yeah, it just always feels like there's some underlying drama. There can never be just like a perfectly wholesome good moment for the Nets. There's always something going on, but I think Nets fans would be willing to give KD a little bit of a pass considering he's kind of carried this team on his back while Harden's gone through his struggles. Kyrie obviously not playing, and KD's been the guy stepping up, averaging almost 29. So not what you want to see, but yeah.
The one thing I think the Nets deserve some credit for this entire time, though, they've never let any of these situations waver from the ultimate goal. Like, even though Kevin Durant made a silly decision last night, not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. We're making it a bigger deal than it is. The Kyrie Irving situation is routinely brought up in the press conferences. I've seen the sound you've sent, Jack. They've kept their heads down, though, to their credit. Kevin Durant said he's not coming down to save us. We've got to win with the guys we have here. And to their credit, 3-3 is not the best, but they're playing together as a team, and they're showing what you need to see early in the season, despite all this other stuff going on.
Yeah, and to the point of Kyrie, just want to give you a quick update. Before the game, Steve Nash said that he has been in contact with Kyrie. They talked strictly non-basketball, so more just Nash checking up on him, which I think is encouraging. That's something you want to see. So, it's not like it's a completely ghost situation. But, to your point about how there's always something going on, to me, just as a criticism to the team, in a you're always happy to get in the W column.
Absolutely.
That's great. However, that game should have been wrapped up much earlier than it was. You talk about the first quarter, they gave up 38 points. I think 3 minutes into the second quarter, Torrey Craig had 16 points, which is just unacceptable. But then you get James Harden going, and then you go into the third quarter, and LaMarcus Aldridge is going, right? And you're riding this lead, and there were just too many instances in the fourth quarter where they just couldn't put away the Pacers. And don't get me wrong, Rick Carlisle's squad has tenacity. They're, I think, 1-4.
1-5. They should be better, I feel like, than 1-5.
But they didn't play like a 1-5 team last night. They played well. But the Nets just should have put them away. There were turnovers. There were poor decisions. And to me, that's really an area to sharpen up going forward. When you have that lead, especially when there are games when, you're not going to get James Harden every night, when, he's got his hamstring issues. Blake Griffin's not playing back-to-backs. LaMarcus Aldridge. They've got some older players that you just can't depend on night in and night out. So when you have a lead in the fourth quarter, you have to seal that away. So to me, I think that's something that the Nets need to work on, just closing out games going forward.
Well, I think that's always been the thing about this team because on paper, the talent obviously is there. We've said this from the beginning. The promise of the Nets' big three is the best team in the East, right? I think we all agree on that. That promise has never been realized. That's option A. And option B is the fact that there's still a lot of those intangibles, as you mentioned. This is a team that hustles hard. They play really hard. They're obviously a scoring machine. The turnovers are a problem, like you mentioned. They could fall into iso ball at certain points as well. And as we heard a little bit in that post-game sound, when these guys are clicking on all cylinders, when James Harden's getting to the free throw line, when they're passing the ball as a team, they're getting the bench involved. I mean, that's the type of when LaMarcus Aldridge is getting 21 points for you. That's when this team is very dangerous because as we know with basketball, look at past dynasties, the Heat, the Warriors, the Bulls, whatever you want. Teams will win because of talent. They win championships because of supporting players, right? I mean, that's how it always has been, Lou. And I think that's the thing for the Nets this season is obviously it's about the big three, especially, though, without Irving. They're going to need these other guys to step up like LaMarcus Aldridge did last night.
Yeah, and obviously you need Aldridge to step up, but I look at a guy like Joe Harris that can knock down threes, too. I like some of these supporting pieces, Patty Mills, even like Blake Griffin, Paul Millsap coming up.
Patty Mills has been, that's a good.
Millsap was really good last night, by the way. That's a guy that I was impressed with his performance last night.
8-4.
It's just like good veteran talent off the bench, and I think the KD James Harden James Harden's gonna get right, and they're gonna get their points. They're gonna have their fun, but especially without Kyrie, I think the spotlight, at least from the fan perspective, should go to how are the supporting pieces? Are they doing enough to make sure the Nets can win games? Because I don't think that a game against the Pacers should be that close for a Brooklyn Nets team, even without Kyrie. And the Pacers are a good team, but I think the Nets should be the gold standard in the Eastern Conference.
Like you mentioned, though, it's early in the season. We can't overreact. You mentioned the supporting pieces. Quick shout out to Joe Harris, of course, setting the Brooklyn Nets franchise record for three-pointers. Jack had some sound on that from the other day, too, so good stuff from him. And I want to broaden the conversation before we wrap up here to the rest of the NBA because we talked about the East. We've acknowledged a little bit front-heavy right now, a bit deceiving, we could argue. Let's talk about the Western Conference for just a little bit. We've got a few minutes here because you could argue it's a similar situation over there. Utah Jazz, 4-0 on the top. Golden State Warriors following them. Then the Timberwolves in the third spot at 3-1. So again, a hodgepodge. Last year's champions, the Phoenix Suns, down in 10th. The Lakers in 9th. So Jack, you've seen a couple teams come through Barclays early, East, West. Give me whatever you want. A team that stood out to you, a team that across the league you think has been underperforming, overperforming. What you just think of the NBA so far this season?
All right, I'll give you two notes.
Okay.
One, do either of you guys know how many rebounds per game Rudy Gobert is averaging right now?
It's got to be high.
Take a guess.
8.
I'll go 10.
All right, take 8, take 10, put them together. He's averaging 18 rebounds per game.
Wow.
I think it was 17.8 the last time I checked.
See, Lou and I did that purposely.
There we go.
That was very
We planned
very
that
on
out.
purpose.
Great A-host, chemistry.
Come on now. Can't sneak one by us, Jack.
That's something I just wanted to make a note of. That I don't see as like sustainable for a season, because who averages? I mean, those are Wilt Chamberlain numbers.
It's the early season numbers right there, yeah.
But very impressed by that. The Jazz are a great team. I am crazy about these Timberwolves.
Really?
I mean, that
crazy high?
Crazy high. Just interested.
Okay.
But also high. I am so. Anthony Edwards deserves to be the face of. He is so entertaining. He's averaging 28 points per game. Could be more efficient shooting the ball, but I mean, he's a volume scorer. He gets the ball a lot, and he has taken strides forward. I think he's averaging around like 33% from three, so that's pretty solid. There's always been so much talent there, and I want it to gel together because I like Karl Anthony Towns, I like D'Angelo Russell, and now I love Anthony Edwards. So I've been really happy with what I've seen, and I think that they can be a playoff team.
That was my question. 113-108 win over the Bucks, their latest. They're a playoff team in your eyes? What seed?
At the very least, they're a play-in team.
Okay.
That's what I'll say. And that's 7, 8, 9, 10.
I mean, for them, though, it is one of those teams, though. It's second-year growth, right? I mean, Karl Anthony Towns said this the other day, too. A lot of people have this narrative about him that he's not playing hard. 28 points a game, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. This dude wants it. I have no doubt about that. And this is a team, I mean, they made some key off-season acquisitions as well. Patrick Beverley, a guy that came in there and a key piece, and I think they're going to be fun to watch. I don't know if they're going to be, third seed that high, but they're certainly an interesting team to watch. Lou, you got any team that you're keeping your eyes on across the NBA?
We've talked about them just a little bit, but I'm keeping my eye on the Wizards, even just from like a Knicks perspective too, because the Wizards were kind of like the easy joke, one of the easy jokes in the East last year. They were supposed to be an easy win, But I just look at their starting five. I look at the way Dinwiddie's playing. Harrell's doing
Forget
it
about
at the
Dinwiddie.
five.
Good point. Yep.
Kuzma gets a lot of he gets made fun of in the media.
It's a good team, man.
But listen, it's not a bad five, and it's a deep East. But that's the scary thing, is that there aren't going to be any easy wins in the East. So to see the Wizards get out to this early lead and have some of the really good teams not have such a good record, I keep my eyes on them.
You know who their one losses to?
Hit me with it.
Brooklyn Nets.
Interesting.
I think we can both agree, though, that the East is a stronger conference than the West right now, in my eyes. So, because of that, the team I'm keeping my eye on, Jack. I mean, come on, who is it? It's
Golden
obvious.
State Warriors?
Golden State Warriors. Come on. My guy, Steph Curry. I mean, look, here's the thing. Whether they're going to win the West or even compete in the West is a whole separate conversation. It's the Golden State Warriors like we remember the Golden State Warriors, and that's the fun of this. And the West is wide open. I think this is the year the Jazz have to make a jump. I think this is really the year with how wide open the West is. They have to make a jump. The Nuggets have to make a jump. These teams, and Jokic just went down, so we'll see what happens with them. But I think this is a wide open Western Conference, whereas the East, even though the Nets are on the outside looking in right now, still got to have your money on the Brooklyn Nets. I think the Kyrie Irving situation will resolve itself. Don't want to spend too much time talking about it for now because there's a whole lot of good basketball going on right now in the NBA. Jack Roche will be here all season long covering it for us here at WFUV. Should be a lot of fun. We'll be talking to him in just a little bit for our Halloween segment to end the show. I know we're excited about that. We'll get the music in the mood once again. Before then, though, talk a couple headlines, MLB, and then the Blackhawks will be back in just a minute here on One on One. Man, these music switch-ups, Lou. These are clean. This is good stuff right here. A little bit of a more tinkle tone, I'm going to call it right here. It's a little bit of a quieter music.
There's just such good Halloween music.
The variety. I mean, I didn't realize.
It's been so strong.
Halloween had such a variety of music. I thought it was always just the same songs, the Monster House and all those songs.
No.
There's a lot here.
There's a lot to work with.
Really good stuff. So thanks, Kayla Wenzel and Nick Guzman, Sam Borer, all the people back there doing some great work, and, of course, Bobby Chaffardini. So our whole crew back there doing a great job keeping us on the air today. And we're going to take a bit of a turn here to talk about the NHL because it's been a fun NHL season. I do want to start with that because, obviously, I've been enamored by the Seattle Kraken. That is easily – we've been talking about them from the second the team name was announced, but I've been so into the NHL this year. A lot of great work being done here at the Station 2. Colin Loughran covering the Rangers. Chris Hennessy and crew waiting for the Islanders home opener to talk about all the storylines over there. But by far, the biggest storyline right now in the NHL is about the Chicago Blackhawks. There is the current lawsuit going around about the former Chicago Blackhawks player, Kyle Beach, who filed a lawsuit then under the name John Doe, was not known at the time that former video coach of the team, Brad Aldrich, had sexually assaulted him and other players during the team's Stanley Cup playoff run back in 2010. Recently, investigations took place back in June. Results then came in this past week. And a lot of key personnel among the Blackhawks and now really scattered throughout the NHL were involved in this, had knowledge of the situation, and did not act on it. And a lot of that has led to an accountability in the NHL that they are trying to cultivate in a really unfortunate situation, Lou. And and been interesting to see the fallout in a lot of different ways since, and a lot of different people from it.
Yeah, you don't. Sometimes these things happen, and that sucks. But I think what makes it worse is that people knew about it, and no one said anything. And it's both people, on an organizational level, like ownership standpoint, and players themselves that didn't say anything. I even read there was a Yahoo article that said that there were teammates that knew about it and joked about it. And it's stuff like that where if that's common knowledge and that that happens to that poor kid, and then just no one says anything, it just makes the whole situation so much worse.
And just to kind of pick apart some of the details, so Al McIsaac, who was the senior director of hockey operations, he has been appears to be forced to resign. The Blackhawks GM Stan Bowman also resigned, said he didn't want to become a distraction to the team. So an interesting kind of way of responding to that. The Blackhawks owner, Rocky Wirtz, wrote a letter to the Hockey Hall of Fame asking for Aldridge's name to be removed from the Stanley Cup. So another element of that. The Blackhawks front office, nobody there said that was working there in 2010 is currently in the organization, so they've cleaned house, and the team received a $2 million fine, with the NHL itself sending out a league-wide memo and setting up a hotline for players to discuss these type of issues. But it's not just the Blackhawks situation, which is why this has been very interesting to watch the fallout. The former Blackhawks head coach at the time, Joel Quenneville, met with Gary Bettman on Thursday. He resigned from the Florida Panthers, was the head coach there. And then the other instance with Kevin Cheveldayoff, the current Winnipeg Jets GM, he met with Gary Bettman, was not disciplined for his role in this back with the Blackhawks organization. So a lot of this really interesting in terms of how this has all had really shockwaves across the NHL. And I think that's the big question here, is that this incident happened in 2010. There was a meeting about this. People knew about it, yet they continue to get jobs. They continue to stay in jobs. And the NHL, I think for me, the big takeaway from this, has to be more accountability. And we've seen this in other leagues when it comes to background checks, when it comes to just keeping a tabs on these issues. Obviously, the NHL is known as a tougher sport, but there are certain things that don't have any place in the league. And when not only do these things happen but get swept under the rug, but the people that let them happen stay in power for a very long time thereafter, a decade thereafter, I think it shows that something really does need to change. And we'll see if the NHL does make those changes or not.
Yeah, there's an interesting conversation you can have about locker room mentality, but there's a huge difference between a fight happens and you keep it under the rug, you don't let anything know, you don't tell anyone about it, and you move forward with the common goal of winning. There are going to be disagreements, but when something like this happens, it's just not right to keep it silent. And what's interesting is that it happened. That was the year they won the Stanley Cup,
which is why it probably gets swept under the rug.
And one of the reasons, they knew they had a good team. They knew they had a good chance to win, and this ended up being a dynasty. They won three Stanley Cups. There were 5-year period, so it was a good team. But certain things are more important than winning. And I know this is sports. This is their job. But I mean, this is this kid's life right here, and just to see it get swept under the rug in the name of winning, I think is a tough pill to swallow, and that kind of speaks to sometimes the way these locker rooms are set up and the meshes that get sent out in them.
Especially because of the fact that, this is sexual assault we're talking about. This is a very serious incident in any situation, especially in an NHL locker room. And when so many people knew about it and did not act on it, that's a scary situation. And also, when it comes to Brad Aldridge, he's a convicted felon. He's done certain things relating to sexual conduct at certain points, and this was known about, and now we're finding out it was part of the Blackhawks organization as well. But even then, after he was hired as a video coach for the USA Women's National Program, shortly after these incidents happened. And you would think there'd be some sort of background checks that would take place to ensure that it doesn't. And obviously, the checks and balances system there was not in place if something like this was happened, and so many people within the Blackhawks organization knew about it, and still he was able to get a job, and still 11 years since, nothing has come of it. And that's really, I think the sad part of this is that, this player, Kyle Beach, had to live with this for a decade without anybody knowing about it, and seeing the Blackhawks have that success and have the Stanley Cup playoff run, and this kind of just be really a non-factor in it for so many years is a really sad thing. And to see it now come out, and hopefully the NHL will take action against it. I think that's the tricky thing about this. Gary Bettman, whether he knew about this or not, is a tricky thing to kind of say, because the Blackhawks had a lot of internal meetings, it seemed like, that never really leaked out. But now that he does, hopefully we could take the right action and kind of move in a more positive direction for the future, because it's really something we've seen, Lou, across sports. We've seen a lot of other sports. MLB is one example. Jared Porter, the Mets situation, we've seen them kind of make strides. The NFL, in a lot of ways, has been tasked with these type of conversations here and there. John Gruden, that just happened, and they've had to overcome that as well. So really, we're seeing the culture in sports that I think a lot of times people deemed as acceptable, commonplace, the way the game is. We've seen there is no place for that. And hopefully all these leagues, the NHL included, can start moving in a more positive direction with these situations being revealed.
Yeah, there's nothing positive about the situation, but the one positive thing you can take away is that it's getting exposed, and now people are getting rightly punished for it. And it's not right that it happens 10, 11 years after the incident, but at least we're starting to shift into a world where people are being held accountable for these things, and it's not this happened and you have to stay quiet about it because it's not okay to air these things. No, Kyle Beach should feel comfortable to air this and to be able to express what happened to him.
I think the hope is that this is just an exception and that this is not something that's going around across the NHL because, like we mentioned, there's a lot of good hockey right now, and we hope that people can keep their attention there on these teams instead of on these stories that really don't have any place in the league, and hopefully they won't in the future as well. And shifting away from the NHL, we also wanted to talk a little bit of Major League Baseball, non-World Series related, because a couple interesting manager moves that are always a fun thing to talk about in the offseason. Going to start right here at home. Aaron Boone. It was a while ago now. It's been a bit of time, but we have not come on the one-on-one airways. I think it happened shortly after our show ended that he actually signed the deal, that 3-year deal to return to the team. Seen the reactions in the week since. What's yours?
Well, I teased it right that I don't hate it, and it was funny because
I hate the way that sounds. I don't hate it.
Well, when JR came, it was funny because he brought up the Boone thing, and there was one kid sitting behind us at that meeting that said he hated the move, and JR kind of laughed about it, and they had a little back and forth.
He said, "Why? It's the players." That's what he said, basically.
And that's my big thing is that Boone isn't the problem. The problem's organizational. It stems from Brian Cashman and even just the organization's belief at sometimes at how to win baseball games, and also on the players. There were a lot of players last year that underperformed, and in some view, it's the coach's job to get them right. But at the end of the day, the players are the ones that have to go out there and produce. And I'm not the hugest fan of Aaron Boone. I don't think that his bullpen strategies are the best. I also think that might be another organizational
That's the question.
thing.
Yep.
The problem is we don't know how many decisions are his own and how many are just getting passed down from the organization. He's just the face that has to carry out those moves. Like, he might not make the lineups, and that could be a pretty big thing. He might very well just be a puppet for Brian Cashman. The focus for me, as I've said, is just there needs to be a change in the philosophy. So I think right after the Yankees lost, we went on one-on-one nightly, and I said I would like to see, if Boone got fired, I would like it because it would show that it shows that they're looking at change. But what they did is they fired Phil Nevin and Marcus Timms, and I think that could be indicative that those were two guys that came in with Aaron Boone. So maybe they're buying into Boone, but we're shifting away. We saw the way the balance played out in the second half, getting lefty bats, getting better defense, more base running. The Yankees stole a lot of bases in the second half, something they haven't done for a while. So hopefully Cashman is embracing kind of a level of change. He admitted that he constructed the team poorly last year.
And I think that's the interesting too about this is that Aaron Boone can only put so much of that onus on him if you know how much of a role he actually plays in the organization itself. You know what I'm saying there? Because I feel like there's all the Yankee fans simultaneously say that Brian Cashman makes the lineup cards, and then they blame Boone when they don't produce. So you can't have it both ways, I feel like. And Aaron Boone, to me, I don't have an issue with anything that he did this year at the end of the day because he cannot make the players play. That's really the point at the end of the day. DJ LeMahieu, he could not have made him have the year that he did. I mean, you could not have Aaron Hicks go down at the beginning of the season. You could not have Gio Urshela, Gleyber Torres struggle on the infield. You could not have these things happen. And I'm sure he put the best lineup out there that he could on any given night. There's questions around his bullpen decisions because those, I think, are his. I want to be clear about that because I think the in-game decision, who's getting pulled where, that's on him.
I share that belief.
But I also think he made bold moves when he needed to. That wild card game, if he had left Garrett Cole out there, that wouldn't have even been a contest. He made the decision to yank him when I thought was a very smart decision. I thought Boone has shown the courage when he needed to make the right moves. And ultimately, look, he lives and dies by the players. That's how managerial work goes in baseball. And he could not have made the players do any better than they did. And what did we see? We saw a great year from Aaron Judge and a great year from Giancarlo Stanton. So all the people that criticize the rest that they get and the things like that, I mean, it worked out in the end this year because Stanton was the only guy keeping them single-handedly in that game against the Red Sox. So I think Boone deserves a little credit there. And if you look at what he's accomplished, 100-win season in 2018, 103 wins in 2019, 60-game season, they lose in the ALDS, 90. This is a down year, 92 and 70. I mean, this is the thing. And obviously, the furthest you get is to the ALCS in 2019. Maybe something different could have happened if you talk about, the cheating scandal, whatnot. But end of the day, the Yankees have always been the team that we expected the Yankees to be. Have they gotten past that hunch? No. Do I think that's because of Aaron Boone? No. To change the manager, like you said, would have required a whole shift in their philosophy from top to bottom. The question is, did the Yankees want to do that, and can they do that with Brian Cashman still there? I don't think so. I don't think the Yankees are going to change their system for as long as Cashman's still the general manager.
Yeah, I agree with that. Cashman's pretty set on what he's doing. They're pretty bought in on their version of analytics. My thing, maybe they need to get better analytics because it
That's the thing.
it wasn't working for them. Analytics does work. It's worked for the Rays. It's worked for other teams. But maybe the Yankees just need to get better analytics because every team uses analytics, but it's not necessarily the same formula.
Yeah.
To give Cashman credit, I liked some of the moves he made.
So did I.
We always talk about Gallo and Rizzo, but I was finding Clay Holmes.
That's a big one.
Moves like that, the under the radar moves are the moves that I think Cashman does really well. So I don't hate keeping Cashman around for a little bit. Let's see what he does this offseason.
Well,
I think this is a big offseason.
His contract end of the season is done.
Then there are talks about getting a big shortstop. Corey Seager's name has been floated out
That's
there.
the thing.
We've heard Correa. We've heard a bunch of things. This offseason could get crazy. So, listen, at the end of the day, I think with Boone back at the helm, it doesn't change that much. It's what's really going to make the impact.
Run it back again.
Is how they construct this roster this time. Is it going to be balanced? Is there going to be athleticism? Will there be speed?
I think that's a good question, too, because I remember listening to the Michael Kay show after that loss, and he was kind of saying exactly what you just said. Why are other teams' analytics better than ours? Because if you look at, on paper, the Yankees have a better roster than the Astros, than the Rays, than the Braves, and all these teams, but clearly there's something missing there. I don't think Aaron Boone's the reason something is missing. Was it the base running? Maybe. Was it the fielding? Maybe. Was it the analytics? Maybe. I don't know. But clearly one thing is good about this team is the locker room mindset. That was never in doubt this whole year. We made fun of the team meetings. We made fun of this. We made fun of that. Aaron Boone never lost control of this team. Even when they were down at the 41-41 record and everybody thought they're missing the playoffs, he remained pat and saying, we drilled him for saying this over and over. We're going to figure it out. Guys are going to turn it around. He was right. I mean, got to give him credit. He stuck to his guns, and this team figured it out. And really, to me, in this modern baseball, that's what a manager does. They just keep the cool in the clubhouse. That's it. I don't think they have a bigger role beyond that. That's all analytics. That's all the GM. And that's where the Yankees really need to improve. And Boone is, I think, the right guy to kind of lead them into the future here and hopefully jump over that curb. And they're going to need the players to do it, I think, is the key thing here. But one more manager to go. We got a little bit of time left before the much-anticipated Halloween segment. But first, Bob Melvin. Stunning. Not the New York Mets, not the rumors, not what they wanted. This is to the San Diego Padres. He leaves the Oakland A's as the winningest manager in team history and makes the jump over to the Padres. Really, what you think, man, the Padres have always been, to me, a World Series or bust kind of team. Now you really are at least playoffs or bust kind of team and a whole lot more to go to get to that World Series.
I mean, you make the moves that they made last year, getting that rotation, the pieces that they have, the big contracts that they have, Tatis and Machado on that left side, and a team that a lot of people viewed as a lock for at least the first wildcard spot in the NL.
Absolutely.
To fall out and completely miss the playoffs. There's a reason there was a lot of fallout. They fired Rothschild. They fired Jace Tingler. I love this move because I think Bob Melvin is great. He had to deal with a notoriously low payroll in Oakland.
Absolutely.
Oakland does that Moneyball thing.
21st in baseball. 21st.
It's always been low, and he's always gotten a lot out of them. I think I see 4 basically 95-plus win seasons and had a .600 record in 2020. So you extrapolate that out, could have been a 95-win season, depending on if that was a full season. So, he's gotten a lot of production out of teams that have been good, not great, right? Oakland's always, I've never believed them to be able to make a postseason run because they've always kind of been right in between. Now he has a great team, in my opinion. This is a great foundation. There's a lot of talent here. With a manager like him, I think San Diego becomes a very scary team.
He won the AL West 3 times, 6 playoff appearances, made it all the way to the ALDS. That's the point right there. People are going to pick at. Why did you only get to the ALDS? I think it's because of what you just mentioned. This was a team that was never constructed financially.
It never gets help.
No.
They never get the help they need. It's always they lose players, and they get some back to just be enough to get that 90-win season, which is, I guess, where they like to be. They never did. They never made the push to be like, all right, let's build on what we have and support our players.
And even this year was probably their worst year in recent memory, and they missed the playoffs just short of it to a Yankees team in the wild card. I mean, really, we can't overreact here. And that's why it's interesting that Bob Melvin left, because I think obviously there was a great thing going in Oakland. He had been there since, I think it was 2011. He'd been there for a decade now. But look,
the longest tenured active manager of
correct.
Team.
Yes, and now it's interesting now because he makes the jump to a Padres team that's objectively better. I think that's the thing.
Yes.
It's also more competitive. And now this is really where it gets interesting now because a lot of questions about the Giants. Are they going to hang around? I think that's a key cog going into next season. The Dodgers will. I think we all know that. The Dodgers are the favorites in the NL West. I don't know what the Giants are going to do next year. I have no idea. It's hard to say.
I would feel bad to rule them out.
Was that we did that this year, and what happened?
Yeah, we did that this year, and they've been good. I think they'll be competitive.
They got to drop off though.
I mean,
somewhat.
Yeah, they got to drop off, and San Diego has to play up to their talent level. San Diego was a team that should be able to play on par with a team like the Dodgers. I think they're not that far away. They're not far removed from being that Dodgers team.
That was the promise this season. I thought the Padres would win the NL West. I thought they would. They were 26 games back of the Giants. I mean, this is the thing. Like, there's such a big gap right now between them and the Giants and the Dodgers. Does Melvin close that gap? I don't know. But I think the one thing that's interesting, all last season, we knew the talent was there, right? That was never a question. What was missing was a leader. They were missing leadership with this team. A lot of young guys, Tatis, Machado, these younger guys that really needed a leader there. Bob Melvin's a leader. I don't think there's any question about that. And if he can just put his stamp on this already talented team and rein them in when he needs to, there's no doubt they're a wild card team. There's no doubt they can compete for the division. Can they compete for a pennant is, I think, really where this gets interesting, because I have the belief they can. I don't know what reason I have to say that, though, considering how the way this team has looked in the past.
Yeah, the thing is that their rotation fully healthy is absolutely nuts.
Incredible.
And you have Tatis, who's going to be an MVP candidate for a decade, and you have a strong offense around him. The interesting thing for me is I don't know what Oakland's doing, because there's already talks, right? Matt Olson could get traded. Bob Melvin had a contract. He was supposed to come back next year. They let him negotiate with.
That was
teams.
Interesting, right?
They let him leave. What is Oakland doing?
Well, they're falling apart. I think that's really. I'm not even going to entertain Oakland, and I think it's tough to say that they're going to fall apart, like you kind of mentioned. But when the money goes at a certain point, when you're letting go of your manager, the one thing, the glue that holds this team together, they're dropping that.
It's going to be not great for them.
And I think I get it, because look, they said this year we put all our chips on the table and we fell short. A year that was a down year for a lot of teams, like the Yankees, for example. But the Padres, like you mentioned, they have the perfect recipe. The pitching is there. The lineup is there. Get a manager, see what happens. A lot of fun in the MLB next season. We'll keep our eyes on the Yankees. We'll keep our eyes on the Padres. Keep our eyes on everybody across the MLB. Right now, we're keeping our eyes on the World Series, because a few more games to go there. See how that one finishes off. And we got one more segment to go, Lou. 142 here on the East Coast. And it's the segment we've been talking about, we've been waiting for. Halloween. It is officially Halloween if you're listening to us on the radio at night, so that's exciting. Enjoy your Halloween, and we'll be talking all things Halloween. Sports, outside of sports, costumes, Jack Roche. What more could you want? One-on-one, coming right back. So I think we've lost Lou Orlando. I'm looking at, I'm going to try to paint the scene for you folks at home. I'm seeing a headband, 2 bracelets with the green, white, and red of the one and only Italy, with the words, it looks like Times New Roman to me. It could be Century Gothic. Could be something in between, in black. We've got the oversized gold chain with the $sign on it. And we've got the Italian. Oh, that's a baseball shirt right there. Italian Stallions. Is that what that says?
Yeah, it's Rizzo and Gallo.
So what am I supposed to be looking at here?
Well, listen. There are a couple of Italian words that would not be so nice. I won't say on air. I'll call myself Captain Italy. You could call me. You know.
You got a superhero here?
Maybe. Well, listen. Initially, this was supposed to be a red Adidas tracksuit. It didn't come. I got it right next to me, so that would be Saturday.
I'm not going to make you whip it out on air.
I'm not gonna whip it out on air, but. I have an Italian flag in my bag. I've been wearing it as a cape. Didn't want to go all out, but listen, this is a good costume.
You got a cape on you?
I you know what?
All right, so while he's fumbling around over there. Oh, wow. Again, so handy. So Lou's going to reshuffle himself. Let's get him settled here. Jack Roche. Now, folks, you might be wondering, why does Jack Roche look very professional today? He was calling a water polo match earlier, the terrific Fordham water polo program. Want to give us a little bit of taste of what's going on over there?
Oh, yeah. I would love to. Thank you for asking me, because I am a big fan of water polo, and Fordham is the school to be at if you like water polo. Ranked 17th right now. They won 19-4 on Johns Hopkins.
Johns Hopkins.
It's tough. There's too many S's in there. But they won 19-4 to put them at 19-4. They stay perfect at home. They stay perfect in the MAWPC. So a lot of perfects and a lot of things to be happy about for Fordham Water Polo.
Catch a game at the Messmore Aquatic Center. Lou Orlando, how about this, ladies and gentlemen? On the call tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Should be a lot of fun. Great program. I have not actually been out there to watch a full game yet, which is I'm really sad about, just the way timing has worked out, because they are a terrific program, nationally ranked, 19-4, a lot of fun. All right, Lou's made his transformation now. What are we looking at?
I have my kid. This is an Italian flag that I've been hanging in my room for about 2 months that
Terrific.
I said...
Preparing for this moment.
Put a keychain in it, I made it a cape.
That's awesome. So me, I did the typical... the jersey outfit, because I did not buy a Halloween costume this year, so we are just sitting with a good old Oregon Ducks. See, we don't have to use those choice words like that. See, we can all be friends around here. But this is, of course, our Halloween segment. Now, we had a lot of fun putting this one together. I shouldn't say we, because I had nothing to do with this, but there was a lot of fun from the people back there, Kayla Wenzel and Sam and Bobby, everybody sending in photos to put together this awesome graphic of everybody's old Halloween costumes. We've got... I don't even know what's back there. Kayla, can you give me, what am I looking at here in my ear? What costumes are we looking at here? Because I haven't actually seen the whole thing myself in terms of these images. But it should be a lot of good stuff back there. I, unfortunately, could not find a photo myself because my mom is out of town right now. Did not have my old Halloween costumes. I'll just give you a taste, though. Star Wars. It was always Star Wars. I mean, we were talking off the jump about our favorite movies. Mine, it's hard to pick which Star Wars one I would go with, but it was definitely... You know, we had the Darth Maul at one point, the double-bladed lightsaber. We had Cad Bane, really getting deep cut stuff right here. Love so you know, so we know what we're talking about here. We had a Clone Trooper one year. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything, but I'd be very curious, because I'll be honest, Jack, I don't know why you're here for this segment, but I'm very happy to have you, and I would love to know what your old costumes were, because we've got a really small photo of some young Jack Roche right here.
Yeah.
What are we looking at here?
I'm in the middle. Let me pull it up on my phone just so I can.
I got the stream for you, but
provide you some.
We've got Sam, we've got Kayla, we've got Lou, we've got our own Bobby Shaffordini. I mean, this is a great photo. While he's pulling that up, Lou, you want to take us inside your photos that you had remarkably handy, as I mentioned off the top, waiting to give to us?
Listen, I've been showing these pictures off for a month. I'm the dude from Alien with the alien shooting out of his chest. It's beautiful.
All right, I've seen Alien and I don't even recognize that. Well, it could be me.
Listen, that's the alien coming out of the chest. Come on now. I have a fake arm there. You can't see I have a fake arm there, so I'm deking you out. So if you're walking around, you see a young 7th grade Lou Orlando, you're like, oh, that's okay. He's got 2 normal arms. All of a sudden, boom, alien shoots out of his chest, and that's just beautiful.
And that's your mom there?
Yeah.
Yes, was that from Star Trek?
I could not tell you. Maybe Mork and Mindy. I don't remember what happened that year. But
I'm gonna take a guess here, and I'm gonna say Sam Borer in the back there. Is that the owl from Harry Potter? Is that Hedwig? Am I wrong about that? Kale, let me know. Is that right or wrong? I would love to know, because I think it's a great costume, though. It is right. So see, I kind of know what I'm talking about. Now, Kale, what are you supposed to be here that you told me off the beginning? A cheetah girl. So to our audience at home, you could see the terrific outfit that has a lot of style behind it, and really styling out here. And Bobby, of course, knows all things racing in the racing attire. Looks fantastic. I tell you, this is quite an assortment right here. And Jack, Ricky Bobby, there we go. Thank you. So that makes that I've got great insight here. So Bobby, Jack,
I was.
What are you, man?
Boxer.
A boxer. Oh, a little tiny. How old were you in that photo?
Oh, I wish I knew.
You sent it in, right?
Yeah, but I got it from my mom.
Oh, that's fun.
I'm trying to do like reverse math because I see my younger brother and he's dressed up as a lion and he looks like he is having the best time ever.
I mean, it's Halloween.
I look so upset. I'm got the bloody face. I got the black eye because I'm a boxer. I look like I just came out of the ring and I just want to take a nap and go home. I'm like Rocky after the movie.
He's embracing the role. He's the most dedicated of the 3.
I guess, but
you're in the mentality
at a certain
of the boxer.
point,
you became your character.
At a certain point, it's like, it's a strenuous job.
No,
you know what I mean?
Now, were you a Halloween guy growing up? Did that have anything to do with this? What was it like in Boston? I would love to. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Halloween in Boston.
Let me tell you,
the
honestly,
suburbs of Boston.
No, I grew up in the city.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's okay. Sensitive time. No, I'm just kidding. For me, there was always a little bit of, I don't want to say resentment, but Halloween was never my favorite thing, and here's why. Because everyone would go trick-or-treating, and at the end, you dump out, your pail.
Of course.
And we trade. We trade
of course,
candy.
Yes, that was fun.
And for me, I was always at a disadvantage because everyone knew that I had a peanut allergy.
Oh.
So for me, they're buying Reese's off me way below market rate. Like, I'm getting ripped off left and right. I'm stuck with all the, bad candy, and they're getting their favorite candy I just can't eat. So for me,
I never looked too deep into this, that there's market value for candy.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so what's
yeah.
the value that? Okay, so let's get into this. Now.
All right, let's do it.
non being ripped off. What is the market value of a Reese's?
Oh, Reese's goes high.
Yeah, no,
what is high? You know about this, Lou? Because I don't.
Chip.
Reese's
That's
are
blue
elite,
chip.
so
yeah.
you need some good stuff back.
You also did this trading?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so what's market value?
I'd say we're gonna make a sports comparison, a Reese's is like a lottery pick, like an unprotected.
A lottery pick.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And you were getting some third rounders?
Oh yeah, I'm getting ripped off. I'm like,
you should be getting like a first rounder and like a solid veteran that's going to contribute to the team.
Yeah, I was getting like protected picks, like
no.
just protected picks for So that's weak. Like if we're doing I was always a big fan of like the Skittle packs.
Okay.
So sometimes I get those back for Reese's, and that was like I was lucky to get that.
All right. So
lucky.
My other question then, Brooklyn, right?
Sure.
What is trick or treating like in the city? Because this is a little interesting to me. Is it your apartment complex? What was your deal like?
Well, see, so I live in Fort Greene, which is a series of brownstones.
Okay.
We didn't necessarily go there all the time. I go between that and Carroll Gardens, which are both fun areas to trick or treat. You know the houses to hit up. They're always the big ones.
Oh, yeah.
I actually one time found an unattended bowl of candy corn, and that was a great time.
All right. Now let's take a break for a second. You see an unattended bowl.
Yes.
And there's a sign. How many pieces of candy do you take?
If there's a sign that says, like take one, I'll follow the sign. But there was no sign here.
What do you do in no
So
sign
I took a handful there.
Jack, no sign situations. What do you do?
I'd always just take one. But what I will say is I'm very curious to see how that goes on through. I feel like, I'm sorry to use like a TikTok phrase, but we are in the devious lick era.
You are so out of my realm right now.
I am so curious to
see.
There's going to be some chaotic things happening this Halloween.
Well, that's the thing, because last year we didn't really have much of a Halloween, and now to have it back this year and to get the costumes back again, to have some fun again, certainly fun. Because I'm also with you. I think this is the time of year where, to me, Thanksgiving and Christmas are the pioneers of this time of the year, and Halloween's kind of like that one that just sits there for people to have a good time, but it's not for the real people that care about holidays. But I still think it's fun. You can have your fair
real people.
Your fair
You
share.
just go broadside swipe at anyone that loves Halloween.
It's like who are these people that like the authentic Christmas and authentic Thanksgiving people? All the people that celebrate Halloween, they're not.
We're peasants
legit.
compared to you guys.
No, my question: Halloween to me is not a traditional holiday, though. It's more of a having fun event.
Yeah,
which is great. I think it's great. Halloween's a lot of fun. Growing up, I'd always get together with my brother. We'd go out, get the candy. I think the reason I wasn't as big into the trading business is like my brother and I, it's all in the same house. My cousins, we're all in the same household. So the candy kind of just becomes here's a basket, and have the candy that you would give out to the kids that's sitting there, and you could just pick every single day. It wasn't really like a business like you moguls over here were running. So for me, it was a little bit more casual, but Halloween was always a lot of fun. And I'm curious, what are some of your past costumes other than that one that you ripped out there from Alien? What else have you always done? Captain Italy this year? What else have you been on your mind?
Back in my Star Wars days, I've hit you with the Darth Vader. I could go Jango Fett on you if you want to get
I think I might have done Jango Fett too once.
Jango Fett was fun.
Better than Boba Fett. I mean, come on.
I did one time. I spray painted my hair black. Did Terminator, wore a muscle suit. That was fun.
Okay.
Had like a red light inside the sunglasses.
All right.
And did Wonder Woman one year, 8th grade year. That was.
You've got a variety.
I purposely
here.
did not send pictures of that. But
Jack Roche, what about you? That was an old photo. What have we done in more recent years, or those high school years, those college years?
I'm trying to think. Last year or before COVID, I grew up. Freshman year, always clean shaven, right?
Yep.
And sophomore year, I decided for the first time ever to like really grow it out.
Okay.
And I was a lumberjack, so I had my flannel.
I remember that. I've seen photos of this. I have seen photos of this.
So and now I like a little facial hair. So shout out to that costume, that quote unquote costume. I don't know. Nothing really comes to mind, but what I would say is if I planned it out a little bit better, I would love to have gotten some sort of like Naruto costume.
Oh, yes.
Because I've gotten on board so heavy with that. big fan of Naruto Uzumaki.
Good stuff right there. Yeah, it's been a while for me too. My favorite memory probably from Halloween is a bit of a later one. One night I was home and I was giving out candy to the kids in the earlier hours, so I went to the store, bought a Papa Smurf hat because I was a big Smurfs guy growing up, and made the kids' day. That's what it's all about, right? Making the kids' day when you give out the candy. You always need the candy bowl. To me was always Kit Kats. That's good stuff. Reese's, M&Ms.
Big M&Ms guy.
Big three.
Big M&Ms.
That's why you're sports manager. That is.
That's the big three?
No, what I'm saying is you and giving the candy to those kids. It's like the beginning of like this.
Wow, that got very sentimental right there.
So shout out.
What a nice moment, Jack. What's in your candy bowl though in terms of your favorite? So you can't do peanuts. So that cuts like what? Snickers is out of the mix. Does that have peanuts in it? Or some other ones that are out of the mix there. So what is in your candy bowl, Mr. Roche?
I like. I'm new to the world of like almonds and all that. Like I used
Almond
to be
Joy and
allergic
stuff
to those,
like that?
but I can have those now.
Oh, okay.
So I like the almond joys. Those
I've
are
never
pretty
really
good.
had those.
Almond Joys and Mounds are both good.
They're pretty good.
I'm a big Milky Way guy. Could really rock a good Milky Way. Butterfingers.
Anyone have any suggestions in the back? Because I think
that.
Dots is another one of those
Dots
like
is strong.
those
Dots.
only Halloween
That's
ones that is always interesting to me. So it's good to have Halloween back. And my Halloween plans this year actually should be fun. We were at the movies yesterday, and now Sunday though, Brooklyn Nets going to see the Pistons game.
I
Should
think
be
I may go.
a fun time. I'm always interested in what the scene is like for Halloween. Does anybody have that experience before of a Halloween game for the NBA? Or I think it could be a football game. Maybe it's a football Sunday for Halloween.
Oh my
I didn't
God.
even think about that.
I actually have a story.
Okay.
Oh boy.
We only got a few minutes here, so let's keep
It's
it quick.
an unrealized story. What happened is I'm from Boston. My dad's a huge fan. We would always have tickets. He'd split season tickets with his friends. And we had tickets to see the Red Sox in Game 7 of the World Series. At home, they hosted the Cardinals.
Oh.
Supposed to be on Halloween.
I see where this is going.
They won in either 5 or 6.
Oh, that's a killer right there.
So what could have been?
That's a killer right there. We're going to have a Halloween game soon, actually, for this year's World Series, too. So it should be a fun time. And this has been a fun show. Jack, thank you so much for taking a few minutes here. Coming out of water polo. He's here today. Nets yesterday. Nets Wednesday. I mean, Jack, there's a lot of stuff going on for you right now.
Well, thanks for having me on. I'm a man who wears many hats. So.
Lou, are you wearing that out to the scenes tonight, or you have a different costume? You use the tracksuit, right?
I got the tracksuit, so I'll throw this on, keep the cape, keep the chains, and...
So you're halfway there. So send us a picture. I'd love to see this when we're all set and done to see what your Halloween attire is like.
I got you.
I don't have as much in store, but tomorrow's Nets game should be a lot of fun based on the conversations we had tonight, so I'm really looking forward to that one. And it's been a fun show in general. A huge thanks to our guest today, that legendary Robert Daly, 91 years old, still doing some really, really incredible things. WFUV alum, Paul Dottino, a lot of years covering the New York Giants, a lot of stuff there. Both of those interviews on WFUVsports.org very soon, wherever you get your podcast. You can catch that, all of our other segments. I think this is going to be one of them, one of those segments.
It better be.
On the WFUV Sports YouTube page. I'm going to post that graphic, too, that separate one with all the costumes. Good stuff right there. Sports director of WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini. A shout-out to the Shadows and the video producer for today's broadcast, Sam Boher and Nick Guzman. Kayla Wenzel behind the board doing some great work, some great graphics work, a lot of good stuff in this show. As always, we'll be back once again next Saturday. Until then, for Lou Orlando, Alex Woltz, Jack Roche, everybody here, enjoy your Halloween. Have a healthy one, and we'll see you all soon one-on-one. As always, a production of WFUV Sports.